Since dreaming of the portal gun of Aperture Technology, Kraft hasn't dreamed of a useful dream black technology for a long time. It's not that one that can be copied is not dreamed, but there are some dream content, which is not much different from the technology he has now. Although it is completely different from theory to manufacturing methods, the function is almost the same. So Kraft did not bother to copy. Until a while ago, when he came back from PIM Technology's press conference, Kraft suddenly dreamed of the old man Rick Sanchez. Well, this time I should not be called the old man, because Rick Sanchez in the dream is still young people. But Kraft still remembered that he used the cucumber potion he invented to solve the problems between Bruce Banner and Hulk. Although Hulk didn't seem to appreciate it very much. So after discovering that the protagonist of this dream was Rick, even the young version of Rick made Kraft extremely excited, looking forward to what kind of black technology he could take out. So Kraft watched the young version of Rick knock out a tube-shaped portal gun. In Rick's test, this portal gun could only be used for short-distance teleportation, and the returned items were all scrapped. Ends. This. Kraft is very disappointed. The gap between the young version of Rick and the old version is too great. Although in normal circumstances, Rick with such equipment is already very powerful, but for Kraft it doesn't make any sense. However, the dream did not end here. Soon young Rick improved the portal gun of his opponent. Not only did he reduce the size from the file size of the rifle to the file size of the pistol, it ensured the completion of the teleportation object, and it could even be carried out. Long-distance space transmission and parallel world transmission. Your span is too big, hey. Even Kraft, who was used to seeing unscientific products in his dreams, couldn't help but complain. This is just as amazing as the green caterpillar directly evolved into the vacant seat. However, this portal gun is still flawed. It cannot locate the coordinates of the teleportation. In other words, the situation on the opposite side of the door is completely random. Then the dream continued to change. Rick's age went from his 20s to 30s and he became the old man state when Kraft first saw him. At this time, he made a third improvement to the portal gun. This improvement has further reduced the size of the portal gun, which is like a remote control with a handle and a green warning light on the hole. And the third generation portal gun can not only adjust the coordinates, but also has a recording function, and even has a space cutting ability. As a transmission device, it is perfect to the extreme. The broken gun of the Aperture Company is simply incomparable, not to mention the silly wormhole generators in dwarf engineering. When Kraft woke up from his dream, he immediately went into the laboratory and began to study the super transfer door gun. Although there are many materials that are not available in this world, Kraft took some time to get the reality gem augmented by the power gem, even if he had to wear it in order to gather these materials. The biological armor was repaired in the treatment cabin for several days. These efforts will pay off after all. When Kraft finally knocked out the Rick version of the portal gun, the Aperture Technology, the Tylan technology, the dwarf technology, all can be thrown aside. Father Rick. Always drop God. However, when Kraft began to test the portal gun he copied, he found that even if he used infinite gems to create materials that did not belong to this world, the portal gun in his hand still couldn't reach that of the old man Rick in the dream. Kind of degree. The first is that there is a limit on the transmission distance. Although it is enough to allow Kraft to fly around in the solar system, it seems a bit tasteless for Kraft, who has established a base outside the solar system, and directly asks Ancient One Grandma to help open the door. The same is true. In addition, the portal gun in Kraft's hand cannot achieve parallel world traversal, and the space cutting ability is also too weak, and the killing efficiency is not as good as directly using weapons such as thermal knives. But Kraft is no longer the kind of pseudo-genius who can only follow the dreams. With the help of Tong Di's learning helmet, Kraft is now fully worthy of the title of genius young scientist. The power of his dreams must be matched with the word no in front of science. So after some research and testing, Kraft roughly speculated a possibility. That is, Rick's portal gun does not match the space rule of the Marvel world. Whether it's the wormhole generator or the portal gun of Aperture Technology, or the fold technology of Tyrone and Protoss, although it may also have this problem, these space devices all have corresponding coordinate stabilizers, which is the so-called fixed point transmission. The success rate of Gnomish Technology's cheating is not mentioned first. The portal of Aperture Technology can only go back and forth between two light portals. Although Jiahui Technology also has variable point transmission, it also has distance limitations, and it transmits Birui. K's portal gun is shorter. Because Kraft's dream power is too mysterious and there are not enough comparison samples, Kraft doesn't know whether his guess is correct. But scientific research originally requires bold assumptions and careful verification. So following this inference, what Kraft needs to do now is to find some Marvel materials with spatial properties that can be used to replace the materials in the portal gun. When it comes to materials for spatial properties, Kraft first thought of definitely the space gem, one of infinite gems, which was also brought to Tesseract in Asgard by Thor. It's just that Kraft learned a lot about Asgard from Ancient One, knowing that there is an acute Asgard there, and Asgard's treasure vault also has special magic protection, so he wants to sneak in and steal Tesseract out, maybe little sex. But Kraft did not give up so easily. As I said before, even the weakened version of the portal gun is enough to make Kraft fly around in the solar system, so as long as he finds the specific coordinates of the Asgard treasure house, he can directly touch it in and get Tesseract and run. It is definitely not possible to ask Ancient One directly. She and Odin also have friendship, and most of them will choose not to help each other, and she is on the magic side, and she may not be able to tell the space coordinates needed by the technology side. The Infinite Gems radar is also not good, let alone its detection range is not that wide. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. has the ability to shield the gamma fluctuations unique to Infinite Gems, which makes no sense. Asgard's treasure house can't do it. But Kraft can't help it, doesn't mean that old Rick can't help it. When Rick was optimizing the portal gun, in order to solve the problem of space stability, he specially developed a device to search and locate those places in the universe with abnormal spatial indexes. Generally, such places will have space-based materials, or something like a space crack. It took Rick a long time to find the right materials to perfect the portal gun. Previously, Kraft was worried that there would be problems with the replacement materials, and it was also an effort to save trouble, so he directly copied the materials in the Dreamland with Reality Gem, but he still had to look for it in the end. After making the search device, Kraft directly locked the detection range to the star field where Asgard was located, and then the instrument showed several anomalous locations in space. There is a whole straight line whose index is very close. You don't need to think about it to know that it is Bifrost. After excluding Bifrost, most of the remaining locations with anomalous space are not stable. Only one area has an abnormal response, but its index has hardly changed, so Kraft can basically conclude that it is the location of Tesseract. And even if the guess is wrong, it's not a big deal, just slip back through the portal if the situation is wrong. However, Kraft was lucky and found the right place for the first time, he can only say. Master Rick Niu Bian. Broken sound. Who are you? Why did you appear in Asgard's treasury? Just as Kraft loved roar, suddenly an ant who was not a good person at first glance pushed open the door of the treasure house and walked in, asking loudly. Kraft put away Tesseract in his hand and pondered for a moment. You can call me Roar, Hermes, the god of thieves. Hermes. God of thieves. Hela furrowed her brows, and she, who had been imprisoned in Niflheim for many years, obviously did not understand the mythological system from the earth. Why don't I know what thieves' god is in Asgard? Oh, you don't know, it's normal, Kraft explained solemnly. I belong to the Greek god system, and it is not a system with the Nordic gods. To be precise, there is also a similar relationship between Asgard and the Nordic gods. A little difference. As Kraft spoke, he moved quietly, leaning towards the green portal not far away. You fool me. Hela threw several black swords with his hand, and while attacking Kraft, he also blocked his way. A rollover escaped Hela's attack, and Kraft reluctantly said, just let me go back, isn't it bad for our wells not to disturb the river? Since Hela's appearance is too much like a villain, Kraft thought of her as a comrade, who also invaded Asgard's treasure house to steal things from the beginning. I will take one of the things in this treasury, and the rest will belong to you. Kraft didn't want to alarm Odin, and voluntarily backed down. The things in this treasury are originally mine, you shameless thief. Hela continued to shoot the sword at Kraft. Wow. You are actually more shameless than me. With the blessing of the Dreamland armor, Kraft easily avoided Hela's attack again, and he kept talking endlessly. He seemed to understand Peter Parker's happiness a little bit. Aren't you afraid that the old and undead Odin will come to trouble you? Odin? It was probably Kraft's claim to Odin that Roar made Hela happy, so she stopped attacking and said to Kraft with a cheerful expression, that old guy is dead. Didn't it mean that he has several years of work? Although Kraft was surprised in his heart, he didn't care too much. What he is even more curious now is, even if Odin is dead, Thor should be the heir to the throne. Who are you? My name is Hela and I am Odin's first child. Probably after being locked up for a long time, Hela's desire to talk is still quite strong. Definitely may also be a professional training as a villain. Anyway, she told Kraft about her origins. I once accompanied him on the 9 realms and flooded the whole world with blood and tears. Suddenly, one day, Odin decided to become a benevolent emperor, to embrace virtue and to soothe sentient beings. Then, he sealed me. In Niflheim, I couldn't get out of the blind place until he died. It was different from the record in Norse mythology. This was Kraft's first reaction after hearing Hela's account. In Norse mythology, Hela should be Loki's daughter, and Loki should be the same generation as Odin, so that the insidious oil-headed reindeer was directly downgraded by 2 generations. As for whether what Hela said is true or false, Kraft definitely couldn't believe it. This has nothing to do with Hela's appearance of the villain, not to mention that it was only her side words afterwards. There are obvious problems with what she just said. If Odin intends to change from a tyrant to a benevolent one, what is the point of imprisoning his daughter? Obviously Hela ignored or concealed something here. What's more, Kraft wasn't interested in the family affairs of their Asgard royal family. Oh, it sounds terrible. After giving an insincere thought, Kraft pointed to the light gate on the side. Then, can I go? You have just taken the throne, you should be busy, so I won't bother. Sneak into Asgard's treasury and steal. As a ruler, do you think I should let you go? Hela made a long sword again and walked towards Kraft in a leisurely manner. Tisk. Kraft smacked his lips. He was still busy going back to optimize his portal gun, but he didn't have time to spend with Hela here. Look at my sunfist. The metal balls on the dream battlesuit all lit up, emitting a dazzling white light, and Kraft took advantage of Hela's eyes to be dazzled, slammed on the floor, and rushed to the portal to the side. However, even though the experienced Hela lost her eyesight temporarily, she still accurately captured Kraft's position. She rushed towards Kraft at a faster speed, piercing him with a sword. Pain, pain, pain. The symbiont cells in the dream battlesuit quickly repaired Kraft's body. This level of physical damage is nothing to Kraft. It just hurts. Hela, who had regained her eyesight, drew out the sword and slashed at Kraft. Kraft rolled and dodged. Although he could not die even if he was chopped, it hurts. Hela did not chase, but reached out to the portal on the side. A thick black mist gushed out of thin air, enveloping the entire portal, and then the thick black fog shrank quickly, bringing Kraft's portal together. Disappear. Gone. Although Kraft can still reopen a portal, he is not a character willing to lose. Although it is a bit wrong to come and steal things by himself, this thing is not originally Asgard's. You want to fight, right? Lao Su will accompany you. Kraft raised his palm, and directed an energy cannon at Hela, who rushed over again. Probably it was unexpected that Kraft, who was eager to escape, would suddenly counterattack, and the energy cannon exploded directly on Hela's face, blasting her out. Kraft took advantage of the victory and pursued, and his hands collided. Hela kept firing energy cannons, but was quickly blocked by the large amount of black crystals she made. Alchemy? Hela's fighting style reminded Kraft of the puppet named Edward in the Dreamland, but compared with alchemy, the only things Hela can make seem to be long swords and a kind of spikes made of black crystals. Although the method is relatively simple, Hela's combat effectiveness is much stronger than Edward's. With the exception of the first energy cannon, Kraft has not been able to hit Hela again. Instead, he himself was stabbed several times. The pain made him grinning. Regenerative healing factor. Hela hadn't paid attention to the first sword before, but so many swords were cut down. Apart from screaming, the thief who claimed to be the god of thieves was still alive and kicking. Hela sneered, and the long sword in his hand was covered with black mist. Hela is the goddess of death of Asgard. Its function is to extradite the undead of all Asgard people. Even if Kraft is not an Asgard, but the power of death she masters alone can dissipate most of the souls of life, so the regenerative healing factor for Hela, it is one of the easiest abilities to deal with. Although Kraft knew that there was an unknown energy response on Hela's sword, it was of no use. His speed and strength were too far behind Hela. No matter how hard he tried to evade, he was still stabbed by Hela again. In the body. Unlike before, the pricked Kraft did not feel pain this time, but had a light and fluffy feeling, as if he was drunk. Although Kraft hadn't drunk so far. The illusion in his head made Kraft's consciousness gradually blurred, and then he fell to the ground with a plop. Elder brother. Just as Kraft's consciousness was about to dissipate, Angela's roar call suddenly sounded in his ears, making him awake suddenly.
What just happened? Brother, your soul was attacked, Angela later explained to Kraft fearfully. If I hadn't used the soul gem to mark your body, you would have died just now.
After learning about the existence of Mephisto, Angela has been working hard to control Soul Gem, and as soon as he mastered the gem, he marked the souls of Kraft and Alice and others, as long as anyone inspires them. Angela could feel their soul instantly. Thanks to Angela's preparation, otherwise Kraft would capsize in the gutter. Fortunately, you have Angela. Kraft was also scared for a while, and almost got rid of it, and probably because the force of death also worked on the biological armor. The automatic combat function of the dream armor actually failed. But thanks to its failure, if Hela takes a few more swords, Kraft is afraid that he won't be able to wait for Angela's rescue. It's been too smooth recently, and it's a bit drifting. In the face of the mysterious side, Kraft didn't pay enough attention to an unfamiliar area. After introspecting for a while, Kraft looked around suspiciously. Huh? Where did that non-mainstream old ant go? The tesseract on his body was not taken away either. Is that the heart of the death goddess? Although Kraft can leave with tesseract in this way, he is not reconciled. He was almost killed, and he wanted to find this place back for whatever he said. Just when I was helping my brother repair your soul, I saw that woman jumped into that hole over there. Angela played back the video for Kraft. In the video, after putting Kraft down, Hila went to the big brazier next to grab a flame and put it in her hand, and then transformed a big pickaxe, knocking a big hole in the floor of the treasure house. Following Hila, he grabbed the flame and jumped into the hole. After a while, after a flash of green light flashed in the hole, strange roars came from the hole, and then a series of footsteps faded away. Unexpectedly, there is a cave in this treasure house. Kraft walked to the hole knocked out by Hila and looked down. It was dark and bottomless. Light up the metal ball lighting on his body, and Kraft also jumped from the hole. After a period of falling, Kraft finally fell to the next level of the treasure house, but at the moment there was no one here, and Hila had long been missing. And judging from the surrounding furnishings, it does not look like a place for storing treasures, but rather like a transformation of a huge amounts of altar. A dormitory? Because here is a circular structure, and the floor has a strange and complicated pattern with a little regular pattern, it looks very much like an altar, but on this altar, there are still circles and circles placed very strictly. The simple bed is not so much a dormitory, but Kraft thinks it is more like a morgue. After looking around, Kraft found another way to leave here. Obviously Hila left from there. So why did she enter the treasure house before and then smash the ground down?
Kraft scratched his head, only guessing that it might not be possible to enter from the outside, or that the flame that Hila grabbed from the brazier above had other uses, such as opening the door.
After all, according to the situation detected by the detection device on the battlesuit, the energy response of the flame in the brazier in the treasury is obviously not normal. Just as Kraft was about to walk out of this passage, there was another sound of footsteps in the treasure vault above. After Loki rescued Thor from Hela, he was quickly picked up by SIF and others. They took the two to hide in the shelter that Odin had prepared long ago, and the civilians who survived at the moment Asgard had already been evacuated. Here. We can't hide here forever. My father told me before he died that Hela has endless power as long as he stays in Asgard. Sooner or later, she will find us. After Frigga's treatment, Thor sat up from the ground and said solemnly. Then what should we do? Loki looked helpless. You tried it before. We are not her opponent at all. Not only is your hammer crushed easily by her, we can't even cause her a little bit of harm. Ragnarok. Hela's power comes from Asgard. We only need to make Ragnarok happen smoothly. Let Surta come back to life here, and destroy Asgard, so that Hela can be eliminated. Thor finally connects the dream he had achieved before with Odin's words before his death. Asgard is not a place, but a people. We should now find a way to move the civilians away, and then resurrect Surta. Surta's crown and the eternal fire are now in Asgard, and it is not difficult to resurrect Surta. This idea is crazy, brother. Even I think it's crazy. Although Loki said so on his lips, his expression was a little excited. Bifrost can send everyone away, but it will take some time. Heimdall glanced at the dark crowd around him and said in a deep voice. Then we will stop Hela. Thor glanced at the civilians in the refuge and commanded decisively. Mother and Heimdall took all the civilians to retreat to Bifrost. Asgard's warriors joined me to protect the civilians and stop Hela. Loki. Go and find Surta's crown, which is the horned helmet that I brought back, and then look at the right time to take him resurrection. Only this time. Loki was very upset about being ordered by Thor, but he still knew the priorities, so after a moment of silence, he obeyed Thor's arrangement and ran to the place where they were fighting with General Corvus Glaive. The rest of the people also moved quickly, and under the leadership of Heimdall, they walked towards Bifrost from the mountain road behind the refuge. You are like a king now. Frigga comfortably stroked Thor's face, and then followed the group. Other people come with me. In order to buy enough time for Heimdall and them, Thor chose to take the initiative to find Hela, grabbing her attention.
However, what he didn't expect was that as soon as they came out, they ran into the undead army and the giant wolf Fenrir that Hela had just awakened.
This sudden meeting made both parties startled for a while, but soon a mocking smile appeared on Hela's face.
I have to say, your tenacious vitality can barely make me admire.
Hela played against Thor again, and she thought she would easily solve Thor before, but she got a little unexpected surprise. When Thor was beaten to death by Hela, he once again communicated with his father through the divine power remaining in his body by Odin, and successfully got rid of Mjolnir and evolved from the god of hammers to the real god of thunder. But even so, Thor only temporarily held Hela's footsteps, and he couldn't hurt Hela, who had the entire Asgard as the backing. And as time goes by, Hela's power continues to increase. At the beginning, Thor, who was awakening, can still suppress Hela, but gradually, the gap between the two is getting smaller and smaller. When Thor and Hela were inextricably fought, the three warriors of Sif and Asgard joined forces to block the giant wolf Fenrir, while the other Asgard fighters fought with Hela's undead army. On the other side, Asgard civilians finally arrived in Bifrost. Heimdall inserted Bifrost's sword bolt steel into Bifrost's center and opened the way to the earth.
This is a decision made by Thor and Frigga and others after discussing them. The homeless now can only pin their hopes on Thor's comrades on Earth.
Don't you guys want to run away? Hela doesn't care about the civilians who flee, but she is determined to fight the universe, but she is sure to win the sword of Bifrost. She angrily waved the double swords in her hand and used a wound for injury style of play to cut Thor. Retreat steadily.
Loki got Surta's crown early, but he didn't rush to put it in the eternal fire. It would be too bad if the others didn't run away when Surta was destroying Asgard.
So he stayed on the sidelines until Bifrost's light came on before Loki took Surta's crown to Asgard's treasure house. As he put the crown in the brazier, Loki chanted a spell, accelerating Surta's resurrection. With the eternal fire, you were reborn at this moment. Loki. Sure enough. I said that you Asgard people don't speak honesty. What you say keeps you in jail forever, it's a lie. As the flames in the brazier soared, behind Loki came a sound that he knew so much. Loki hurriedly turned his head. Although the opponent was wearing an unfamiliar armor, from his words and past memories, Loki had guessed that this was the Earthling who planned to kill him when he didn't agree with him. If it's normal, Loki doesn't mind teasing this Earthling, and asks how the other party got into Asgard's treasure house. But the current situation does not allow Loki to waste time here. Surta has already started to wake up, and he will be in danger if he doesn't run away.
So after Loki glanced at Kraft, he turned his head and ran away without saying a word, and habitually lost a duplication with illusion to confuse Kraft's vision.
But how could Kraft, who had seen Loki's illusion on the Earth a long time ago, not guard against his hand? The thermal imaging sensor device was already ready, and the dream battlesuit locked Loki's true position for the first time. Guidance magic and anti-magic realm. Kraft, who had been taught before, immediately used the skills dedicated to the magic side. Under the shining of the red light, Loki's duplication disappeared, and the body was also exposed. What happened? Aware of the sudden failure of his spell, Loki cast an illusion again anxiously, but he was surprised to find that although his divine power was functioning normally, he could not successfully form the spell.
Considering the weird red light just now, Loki turned to look at Kraft.
However, Kraft didn't have time to take care of Loki at this time, because in the previous brazier, a humanoid creature composed of flames and magma was recovering, and its size was gradually increasing. Hey. Loki is too cruel, right? To fight for the throne actually played so big? Kraft, who didn't understand the inside story, widened his eyes, spit out subconsciously, and then shot the flame creature in front of him.
Surta was staggered by Kraft's energy cannon, but in the process, his body continued to grow. After Kraft finished the attack, he saw the situation and went straight away.
Although Loki was sealed with magic, his physique as giants of Jotunheim was still enough to escape Surta's attack range in time. Brother, are you talking about Ragnarok in Norse mythology? Angela suddenly reminded. Look, there is a black wolf over there, maybe it's Fenrir or Gam. Ragnarok and Asgard in Norse mythology were attacked jointly by the fire giant, frost giant, Loki, Hela, Fenrir, Gam, and Jemingard, and eventually they died together with the Nordic gods. In the current situation, although there are fewer characters on the scene, it is also very compatible with the scene of Ragnarok in Norse mythology. More importantly, Odin also died at this time. Isn't Norse mythology made up by the people on Earth? If you say that the characters have the same name, it may be influenced by the people on Earth who know Asgard, but the language is a bit unreasonable in the future of Asgard, right? Kraft actually agrees with Angela's analysis. He just thinks that Asgard talks about the patron saint of the Earth all day long, but in the end he is predicted to death by the Earth myth. This sense of gap is really funny. Shake in front of me, Asgard. I have come to you to settle the account. Surta waved the great sword in his hand, and cut wounds on Asgard's land. The turbulent flames swallowed everything around, and the whole Asgard was plunged into a sea of flames. In addition, Kraft probably fired a shot when he was awake. Surta chased Kraft every time he slashed. Tisk. Your hands are cheap. Looking at the exaggerated flame sword in Surta's hand, Kraft didn't want to use it to test the repair of his biological armor. After a sharp turn, he dodged Surta's great sword again. Kraft pulled off the breastplate of the battlesuit and aimed it at Flame Giant's head. He still remembered the guy with the horns on his head when he was recovering. The skull mask started. Eat my particle cannon. A white beam of light gushed from Kraft's chest and hit Surta's head fiercely. Serta did not expect that such a little point of craft could actually release such a huge amount of attack. The hit he could not stabilize his center of gravity, he fell back on his back, huge amounts of body fell down. In the waters of Asgard, a huge wave was set off, and a large amount of water vapor was generated. No one can stop me from destroying Asgard. Serta quickly stood up again, holding a giant sword in his hand and screaming upwards. Kraft's particle cannon could not do much harm to him. Small size is indeed a disadvantage in most battles, not to mention the exaggeration of the size gap now, so Kraft directly opened a universal capsule and released the pirate Gundam that had been useless for a long time. Although the pirate Gundam that is more than 10 meters high is still a small thing in front of Serta, which is now hundreds of meters high, don't forget that Kraft also has zoom in and zoom out lights. Under the illumination of the zoom lamp, the pirate Gundam, which was more than 10 meters high, instantly became a body taller than Serta. Only you can grow bigger? It was a great cut just now, right? Kraft wielded the also enlarged Muramasa madknife and slashed at Serta's body severely. What? Serta let out a miserable howl, and the strange steel giant in front of him struck him in the shoulder with a sword, almost cutting off half of his body. However, such huge amounts of wounds still won't cost Serta his life. The heat generated by his body originally caused the village Masaki to cut into his body to turn into molten iron, and his half that was about to be cut off. The body closed quickly. Gone. When did the skill of regenerative healing factor start to suck? Kraft threw away the scrapped Muramasa Kazune in his hand, took out a beam gun and pointed it at Serta's head with a few beams. I don't know if it's mainly because of heat damage. Neither the beam gun nor the previous particle cannon can cause any effective damage to Serta. Brother, or just call Aurelie. Angela suggested very sincerely. Let me try another method. Kraft refused. He felt that he still had to fight, and he couldn't call Aurelie for every fight in the future, right? Although Aurelie didn't care and would even come to play, very happily, Kraft still wanted to solve it by himself. There is no reason to throw nuclear bombs as soon as the countries on the Earth are in a quarrel. Although what Kraft is doing now seems to be a bit more than a nuclear bomb. I still have infinite gems to no avail. As Kraft spoke, he took out the power gem from the infinite power guidance device, and then stuffed it into the control center of Pirate Gundam. The purple light centered on the cockpit and quickly walked around the whole body of the Pirate Gundam. Just loading the power gem, the energy channels of Gundam sounded a rapid overload alarm. However, Kraft ignored these alarms and instead planned to add fuel to the fire. Then, Transam. With the opening of the Transam system, the whole body of the Pirate Gundam was flushed with crimson. Kraft no longer used any weapons, and directly controlled the Pirate Gundam to throw his fist on Serta's body. After using the power gem, the Pirate Gundam is probably going to be scrapped. It doesn't matter whether it will be melted by Serta. The power gem is worthy of being the supreme treasure in the universe. The Pirate Gundam punched it, directly smashing Serta's flame giant sword into two pieces, but at the same time, the right hand that the Pirate Gundam swung was also directly broken into powder. Do not your mother. Kraft was unreasonable and controlled the Pirate Gundam to swing his left fist, which hit Serta's head. As before, the Pirate Gundam died with Serta's head and helmet directly on his left arm. The flame on Serta, who had lost his head and crown, quickly extinguished, and the huge amounts of body turned into a charred sculpture and quickly shattered. After the Pirate Gundam hit these two punches, the joints of his body began to sparkle, and the 4 solar furnaces behind it leaked a large amount of GN particles, almost covering the entire Asgard sky. Damn. The escape device is also broken. Kraft quickly took out the power gem, put it back into the infinite force guide, and kicked open the cockpit door of the Pirate Gundam, turning himself and Gundam back to the normal file size, and then quickly turned towards fleeing away. Boom. Although the shrunken Gundam had a lot of power when it exploded, it could not reach Kraft. Look. I can win without Aurelie. Kraft triumphantly showed Angela. But brother, didn't you want Hela to get revenge? What's the point of winning this flame giant? Kraft. It's heartbroken, old girl. When he saw Serta starting to destroy Asgard, Hela had already abandoned Thor and others, planning to bring his undead army and Fenrir up to fight him to death. In the end, Hela ran out a few steps, and saw that the god of thieves, who should have been stabbed to death by her suddenly appeared in between. One by one, the steel puppets, who were bigger than Serta, fought and died with Serta. This series of changes was so sudden that Hela couldn't react it all at once. Thor and others were also unable to react. They originally watched Serta appear, and Hela was also distracted. They were planning to take advantage of this moment to run to Heimdall and use Bifrost to evacuate to the Earth, but they suddenly appeared. An inexplicable steel puppet beat Serta to death in 2 blows. What will Ragnarok do? Thor looked blank. Thor, did you ever see this steel giant in your dreams? Sif, covered in blood, came to Thor's side and asked suspiciously. No, not. Thor subconsciously replied, still blank. At this time, Loki ran over with a scared face. He just ran halfway, and saw that the puppet driver who wanted to take his own life was doing it with Surta. Originally, Loki was still laughing at the overpower of the Earthling. Whoever wanted him to backhand would take out a more. Surta was crushed to death. Thinking of his life as if he was being watched by this dangerous Earthling again, Loki shivered nonchalantly, and then ran to Thor frantically. Brother. You must save me. Before Thor could ask what was going on with Loki, Loki asked him for help first. What's wrong? Hela is here. Thor, who recovered his senses, was tense and shielded Loki behind him. No, it's not. The Earthling. Earthling? Thor looked at Loki in surprise. Where are the Earthlings from this time? How do I know? Loki growled impatiently. Anyway, when I went to resurrect Surta, that guy was in the treasure vault. If Surta didn't divert his attention, I would be killed by him. And that guy doesn't know what he did to me. I can't use any spells now. Loki waved his arm, and a green light shot from his fingers, smashing Thor. Oh, it seems to have recovered. Loki stared at his fingers blankly, then gave Thor a wry smile. I was absolutely not lying just now. Thor glared at Loki severely and got up from the ground, but didn't continue to pester him on it. Anyway, he was not played by Loki once or twice. This level of mischief was harmless at all. Wait. Who are you talking about? Compared to the trouble with Loki, Thor is more curious about who he calls the Earthling. It's the guy who was thinking about killing me when I invaded the Earth last time. Loki kept staring at the direction of Surta's fall in shock. He is the one who killed Surta just now. You mean Kraft? What are you kidding? Thor raised his voice in disbelief. Although he knew that Kraft had the same technology as Stark, it was hard to believe that he was the one who just killed Surta. The Earthling who has been thinking about killing me, who else is there besides him? I think there is definitely more than one Earthling who wants to kill you. Fandral, one of the 3 warriors of Asgard, made a fair statement. Even in Asgard, there will be many people who will kill you. But he is the only Earthling who meets the conditions. At this time, Loki didn't have the leisurely sentiment of arguing with Fandral and the others, because now not only is his proud spell sealed by Kraft, but also his toolman brother does not seem to have enough strength to protect himself. He's also a member of that Avenger? You should be able to persuade him, right? In this case, Loki can only hope for Thor's connections on Earth. This. Thor quizzed his nose. Kraft didn't join the Avengers. My relationship with him was actually not good. We almost got into a fight several times. It's over. Loki suddenly looked desperate, then pulled Thor and ran in Bifrost's direction. Quick. Let Heimdall send me to another safe place, before Kraft can find it. If what Loki said is true, then Thor is not sure to save him from Kraft, and now regardless of whether Ragnarok can happen, they must also run away first, so he also followed Loki to Bifrost. And recruit Roar to other people. Anyway, let's evacuate first. Just as a group of people retreated to Bifrost's control center mightily, Hela's giant wolf Fenrir suddenly flew from a distance and smashed in front of them severely. Immediately afterwards, they saw countless swords and magic tumbling and moving here, destroying everything along the way like a natural disaster. Thor and others could vaguely see them in this natural disaster composed of swords and magic. There are 2 figures. The woman with a spider-like head is undoubtedly Hela, and another huge black figure Thor has never seen, but according to Loki, he can also guess that it is probably Kraft's new armor or something. Exist. Thor didn't guess wrong either. That figure was Kraft in a giant colony. Because of the power of death and the gem of power, the biological repair function of the basic dream armor almost stagnated, so he killed Surta. Put on a further giant costume. With the protection of Angela with Soul Gem, Hela's power of death has no effect on Kraft, and this time Kraft has sacrificed the symbiote flying sword and guiding magic, which is no longer stupid. What fighting skills do you compete with Hela? The combat power of Kraft, who put on a giant colony, sword, not only stabbed Hela more than a dozen swords, but also used magic to blow her up, but it was still in the embarrassing situation before, and Kraft couldn't kill her. Even if you want to use the power gem to perform miracles vigorously again, although the power gem was used through the Gundam before, Kraft was still affected as a manipulator and could not be used again in a short time. When Kraft was considering whether to find some helpers, such as Aureli, the old lady Hela took the lead in not talking about martial arts. The undead army and Fenrir under his command rushed forward and began to fight Kraft. Special. Those undead soldiers were nothing, and were quickly wiped out under the serial bombardment of Kraft's symbiote flying sword and guidance magic. But the giant wolf Fenrir is more troublesome. Not only the strength and speed are not inferior to Kraft wearing the giant colony, but the defense and resilience are not bad. In this case, Craft can only shake people. Ha 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 ha. Accompanied by familiar laughter, a little girl with purple hair rushed out of Craft's newly opened portal. Alale. Go and play with that big dog. Ouch, that's so handsome. Aurelie saw the black wolf that Craft pointed out to her, and Roar ran to Fenrir with a scream. How are you? Aurelie rushed to Fenrir and gave it a light push. Then Fenrir fell in front of Thor and the others. Fenrir shook his head and climbed up from the ground. After seeing Thor and others in front of him, he immediately lowered his body, exposing Bysenson's teeth, and began to growl in a low voice. You made the wrong choice, puppy. Thor took a step forward, the power of his body revolved, lightning began to haunt him, even his eyes lit up with dazzling lightning. However, before he could attack Fenrir, Thor saw a little girl with arms outstretched running up to Fenrir at a very fast speed, standing on tiptoe, and reaching out to stroke Fenrir's nose, who was growling. Good dog, hey, be careful. Thor quickly reminded him loudly, and rushed towards Aurelie, trying to save her from Fenrir's mouth. Ouch. Aurelie, who heard Thor roar yell, turned his head and saw that he was rushing towards him, who was covered with electric lights, and stretched his arms to call Thor. How are you? Just when Aurelie turned to call Roar, Fenrir opened its mouth and bit down at Aurelie. Do not. Thor still took a step slower, and could only watch Fenrir's sharp teeth fall on the poor little girl. Then it collapsed into a pile of fragments. Eh? Thor stared blankly at the little girl, not only unscathed by Fenrir's bite, but also crawling into Fenrir's mouth with a smile. Aurelie got into Fenrir's mouth, grabbed its upper jaw with both hands, forced its mouth open, then stretched her neck and looked curiously into Fenrir's throat. Hey! Anyone? Aurelie yelled into Fenrir's throat, then turned his head to see if there was any response. So definitely, Fenrir's growl was the only response to her. But this didn't affect Aurelie's happiness. She started to laugh in the next second, and seemed to find such a game very interesting. But Fenrir didn't find it interesting at all. Under the strong restoring force, its teeth quickly grew back, but no matter how hard it was, it couldn't close its mouth. Roar. Fenrir let out an angry roar, and it shook its head vigorously, trying to shake the little girl in its mouth. Ha 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 ha, hurry up! Hurry up! Aurelie clasped Fenrir's fangs firmly with both hands, swinging around its mouth, letting out bursts of cheerful laughter. Thor. Do you know this little girl? Seeing that Fenrir, whom she and the 3 Asgard warriors could barely fight, turned into a little girl's toy. SIF was a little unacceptable. She came to Thor's side and asked curiously. No, I don't know. Thor shook his head. He hadn't played Craft's Dreamland, so naturally he didn't know the popular NPC in the game Aurelie. Then, shall we help? You are joking? Loki rolled his eyes at SIF and pointed to Aurelie, who was pressing Fenrir's nose with one hand, and letting it lie firmly on the ground, unable to move. Does she seem to need our help? Then Loki turned to Thor. Let's leave here as soon as possible. I don't think Hela can do anything with this little girl. You don't have to worry at all. You're right. Thor slapped his thigh, but his thoughts were different from Loki. We can let her help deal with Hela. And Craft, if he can defeat Surta, Surta can do it. He should be able to do the things that arrive. Hey. Wait. He wants my life. When Loki heard that Thor actually wanted to take the initiative to find Craft, he quickly objected. I think if you talk to him well, he should forgive you. Although Thor has grown, his mind is still too naive. But Loki is different from Thor. It's not that he doesn't know how much he hates what he did, especially now that Asgard, who is backing him, will probably be gone. Even if Craft let him go, the Earth's officials who were forced to succumb before will also come to turn over old accounts. So from the beginning, Loki never thought about going back to Earth with Thor and the others. What he thought was that after resurrecting Surta, he would use Tesseract in the treasury to drive away and come to the death of his habit. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the treasure house, he found that Tesseract was gone, and he also ran into the Earthling Craft, who had great opinions on him, so he had to rely on Bifrost to send himself to other places to take refuge. No matter what, it's better for you to let Heimdall send me away first, and then find the Earthling named Craft. Loki insisted on running away first. When the two brothers were arguing, Craft, who was fighting Hela, felt that the situation was a bit bad, because the strength of the non-mainstream ant in front of him seemed to be growing. Originally, Craft, who was wearing a giant colonial costume and using the power of guidance magic, was able to press her to fight at first, but soon the battle situation became back and forth, and now Craft has faintly struggled. And Hela is different from Loki. Even if Craft uses the anti-magic domain to temporarily seal her ability to summon weapons, her original combat effectiveness and combat skills will not be greatly weakened, that is, she has a slight flexibility limit. Coupled with the constant use of anti-magic domains on the same target in a short period of time, the effect will be greatly reduced, so this trick gradually becomes useless. No wonder Odin just locked up Hela. I thought he couldn't bear to do it. Now it seems that even Odin can't get rid of her. Kraft, who once again used the power of magic, howling in the ice prison, couldn't help but vomit. He was a little confused whether Hela was still regaining her strength, or whether Hela was getting stronger and stronger like the Saiyan. The previous howling of the ice prison could freeze Hela for a while. After she broke free, it took a while to recover from the injuries on her body. Now Kraft smashed it through with a magic, and even Hela's oily skin could not be wiped. This is too special a foul, right? Kraft sighed helplessly, and while blocking Hela's long sword with a high-frequency knife, he used a head laser to hit her eyes. However, Hela just stretched out her palm and easily blocked the extremely high-temperature laser. The scorched black spot burned by the laser in her palm almost disappeared without a trace the moment the laser stopped. To deal with this kind of foul, is it really necessary to let the more foul Aurelie come? Kraft smacked his lips, but this was somewhat contrary to his original intention. Kraft still wanted to avenge himself, just like the original Hydra. Damn it, if it weren't for the inexplicable flame giant before, I could directly use the power gem to solve Hela. Alare is also made by you. What's the problem? Don't I often help you fight? Angela didn't understand Kraft's thoughts a bit. That's what I said. Kraft still doesn't want to let Aurelie take action, because whether Aurelie deliberately kept her hand or her original conceptual setting of the world, Aurelie has not killed anyone yet. To be precise, Aurelie has never killed a life until now. She has been abiding by her code of conduct as a good boy, so Kraft, as her brother, does not want to force her. After listening to Kraft's reasons, Angela, as the older sister, definitely agreed with Kraft's ideas, so she wanted to simply let her mechanical duplication transfer over. Although Angela's mechanical duplication is weaker than Aurelie, it shouldn't be a problem to help kill Hela. Among Kraft's 3 robot sisters, Angela is the only one who is not bound by human morality. Unlike Alice, who has always been close to humans, and Aurelie, who wants to be a good child, Angela is proud of her race of intelligent life, and apart from a limited number of humans such as Kraft, everyone else is just like her. Bugs are no different. But just as Angela was about to volunteer, the communicator she put on Aurelie collected the conversation between Loki and Thor. Huh. Brother, come and listen to this. So, this guy turned out to be an existence similar to Ego? Kraft is really speechless. There are just a few villain templates in the Marvel world. But when dealing with Igor before, Kraft knew that he still had a core, so he let Aurelie take the shot. He doesn't understand the situation of Hela very well now. What if she is dead and dead after Asgard is destroyed? So Kraft decided to do it himself. Angela, you go and drive the shadow spear to the laboratory, and then teleport it through the new portal. Kraft licked his lips and said to Angela. The Spear of Shadow in Kraft's mouth is actually a supergiant warship that Kraft used to transform the Spear of Arden using Ronin's Dark Star. After Kraft made it, he shrank it down, on the Star of Aurelie. Kraft carried several weapons of mass destruction on the Spear of Shadows, but they had never been tested, so he took this opportunity to try the water with Asgard. Anyway, Thor intends to let him destroy Asgard, and Kraft will naturally not be polite, and he has been thinking about how to retaliate against Asgard. Now he has a chance to get his mind. Guidance Magic Sky Dragon Scroll. The huge amounts of tornado blew Hela into the air, and Kraft looked at the opportunity to blast her into the ground with a chest particle cannon. Then Kraft added 2 more magic to the pothole on the ground. Guidance Magic Thunder of Judgment. Guidance Magic and Meteorite Fall. The violent thunder pillars and burning meteorites hit Hela one after another, burying her deeply in the earth. Kraft quickly rose into the air while Hela hadn't come out, then took out the portal gun that had already adjusted its coordinates, and summoned a green light gate in the air. On the other side, Angela had already driven the Shadow Spear back to Earth through the 2-way portal of Aperture technology. After the green portal appeared, she controlled the Shadow Spear and came to the sky above Asgard. Aurelie, we should go now. Kraft fell to Aurelie, who was still playing with Fenrir, and hugged her up. Brother, can we take this dog home? I'm afraid this won't work. Kraft glanced at Fenrir, who had begun to attack himself after breaking free, and raised his hand to blast it out. Look at it like this, it's not as good as Quinn's Obedient. If you like this kind of big dog, I will make one for you in the game. Great. Aurelie actually thinks this big dog is not as interesting as her own Mr. Quinn, she still likes Fenrir's fierce look more. So after getting Kraft's promise, she crawled along Kraft's arm all the way to the shoulders of the giant's cloak, and sat there obediently shaking her 2 short legs. You are. Kraft? Thor also stopped the argument with Loki at this time and leaned in. Loki strayed quickly when he saw Kraft. Kraft glanced at Loki, who was running towards Bifrost, and then looked away. He has no time to trouble him for the time being. Kraft. I want to ask you if I have something to do. Thor was still beside him, shouting roar loudly. Destroy Asgard, right? I already know it. I definitely can't ask for such a good thing. Although Kraft didn't like Thor, he didn't even kill him, so he reminded him. If you don't want to be affected, you'd better leave here quickly. As Kraft's voice fell, Thor felt the sky suddenly darken. He looked up and saw a black battleship with huge amounts of appearing in the sky. The overall shape of this warship is a cone, and the black hull is shining with blue light, which makes the whole warship appear solemn and gorgeous. This is your battleship? Thor looked at the spear of shadow in the sky for a while, then turned his gaze back and asked Kraft, but by this time Kraft and Aurelie had long since disappeared. Where are they? The bodies of the two of them just turned into blue phantoms and disappeared. The one who answered Thor was Vostag of the three warriors of Asgard. Because of his position, he was attracted by the shadow spear and also saw Kraft's departure. It's kind of like Loki's magic. Kraft should not be able to use magic, he uses something called technology like Stark. Thor explained to his friend while leading everyone to Bifrost. The battleship in the sky looked many times bigger than the Surta and the steel golem before. Thor had no doubt about whether Kraft could destroy Asgard. Ah ha 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 ha. At the moment, in the interior of the shadow spear, Aurelie, who entered such a huge amount of spaceship for the first time, was very excited. She swiftly drilled inside the battleship, teasing Harrow and the Iron Ball at work from time to time. Aurelie, don't run around, I'll show you around this battleship. At the critical moment, Angela was reliable. She controlled her mechanical duplication to stop Aurelie, who was destroying everywhere, and then took her directly to the amusement park inside the shadow spear. And Kraft at the moment has also locked onto Hela, who burst out of the ground, grinning open the corner of his mouth, manipulating the spear of shadow, and aiming the muzzle at the goddess of death below. First let me have an orbital bombing to give you a taste. A small piece of armor rises on each side of the shadow spear, revealing the light cannon hidden underneath. Said it is a small piece, it is also for the main body of the Spear of Arden. In fact, this small piece of armor also has an ordinary yacht file size. Blue rays of light gathered under the armor and spewed light bullets to the locked Hela below. The size of each light bullet was a circle larger than the meteorite made by Kraft using magic before. After a round of orbital bombing, several layers of land near Hela were knocked off. Hela herself was seriously injured, but no matter how serious the injury was, Hela was not a problem, and she could recover in the blink of an eye. But Kraft's attack just made her feel a palpitation. If Kraft is allowed to continue bombing like this, Asgard will be destroyed in this terrible light cannon sooner or later.
Hela mobilized all the divine power in the body. A spike rose from her feet, and quickly formed a growing mountain, carrying her to the huge black battleship in the sky, and in the process constantly throwing one after another long sword at the shadow spear.
However, since the shadow spear is built based on the most outstanding of the Protoss family, it is natural that the Protoss family must have an energy shield. Before Hela's long sword touches the shadow spear, it is given by the outer energy shield. Stopped. Hela, who was stepping on the mountain under his feet, suddenly saw a light shine from the bottom of the spear of shadow, and then a beam of light that covered the sky fell from above, directly smashing the mountain. At Hela's feet, he blasted Hela back again. While suppressing Hela with the purifying beam, Kraft successively turned on a series of huge amounts of weapons such as solar bombing, proton colliders, antimatter bombs, and so on, which he copied from his dreams. Pillars of light and ammunition of various colors poured out from the spear of shadow, and kept falling on every inch of Asgard's land. Thanks to Asgard is not a regular planetary form, but a continent suspended in the universe, the Spear of Shadows does not need to move at all. As long as it is suspended above Asgard, the weapons on it can attack any position of Asgard. After the bombardment lasted for 5 or 6 minutes and Asgard's land was lost by nearly a third, the following situation changed. The entire Asgard glowed with white light and began to collapse, and the Spear of Shadow also sounded a warning, notifying Kraft that there was a violent energy reaction underneath. Kraft made a decisive action, stopped all attacks, and then turned on the short leap of the Shadow Spear and evacuated Asgard. Not long after the Spear of Shadows left, the huge amounts of explosion occurred in the already unrecognizable Asgard, and the entire continent was turned into star dust in the sky. Roar. Kraft watched Asgard disappear into the world from a distance, and let out a long breath. Although he had made up his mind to destroy the entire Asgard, Kraft really saw a planet disappear in his hands, and Kraft inevitably felt a sense of sorrow. Back to his laboratory with Tesseract, Ancient One waited there early. You really are. As always unexpected. Ancient One's expression is very complicated, which is different from the development she has seen through the timeline before. Odin died a few years earlier, not to mention, 6 infinite gems are still present on the Earth. What is even more exaggerated is that the Craft family has 5 in their hands. Even if I have seen all kinds of crafts in countless timelines, this one in front of me is definitely the fastest one to collect infinite gems, faster than the crafts who collect gems in some timelines. Many times. Hey, you know. Craft touched the back of his head and smiled shyly. Nonsense. Ancient One rolled his eyes. Asgard people have migrated to the Earth on such a large scale, and I haven't responded to such a big movement. That's what a supreme magician. Didn't you throw this unlucky seat to the horse-faced doctor a long time ago? Craft curled his lips. Ahem. Strange is a magician more talented than me, and Kamar Taj also needs to add new ideas. Ancient One explained seriously. Craft glanced at the crumb magician contemptuously, put Tesseract on the workbench, and then manipulated the robotic arm to start laser cutting. As the container of the space gem, Tesseract is not too hard. After Craft raised the intensity of the laser to level 4, he easily cut it open and took out the space gem inside. Then Craft carefully put the space gem into Father Rick's portal gun. So you went to Asgard to make a lot of trouble, just for this thing? Ancient One poked his head over and asked curiously. Have you not seen me invent this in other timelines? Craft shook the portal gun in his hand. With the impressive level of this gun, he felt that no matter what the situation, he would definitely find a way to replicate it. No. What is this for? When Craft was making the portal gun, Ancient One was not there, because the guy Mephisto was restless again. This Hell Lord did not give up after being attacked by Ancient One. He has been trying to find a way to sneak into the world again to obtain a special soul similar to Herbie. But there are too many fart facts on the Earth recently. Ancient One thinks it is better not to have one more Mephisto at this time, so she has been busy chasing and blocking Mephisto a while ago. It was not until yesterday that Ancient One found the opportunity to secretly throw the clue to Strange, and as a result, it encountered the Asgard migration again today. I always feel lonely when I retired. Craft didn't know the annoyance in Ancient One's heart. After he heard Ancient One's question, he immediately got excited. This gun is incredible. It's a teleportation device that works better than your circled spell. Craft excitedly introduced the function of the portal gun to Ancient One. Parallel world. Ancient One hesitation. I don't know whether to tell Craft or not. In fact, the time machine he made before was essentially traversing parallel worlds. It's just that the difference between parallel worlds that use time to travel through will be very small, and some kind of closed time loop will often be formed, allowing the branches on these timelines to develop in almost the same situation. That's why Ancient One cares so much about Craft, because each of his futures is very different. At the time of Ancient One hesitation, Craft couldn't wait to open the parallel world crossing function on the portal gun, and opened a green portal to the open space in front of him. Want to go see it together? Craft invited. Alright. Ancient One thought about it, and felt that there shouldn't be any major problems in the recent period. It shouldn't matter if you go back quickly, so he accepted Craft's invitation. In fact, she was also quite curious about what those parallel worlds of non-timeline branches were like, just to open her eyes. After explaining to Angela, Craft took the host with her duplication program, and then stepped into the portal with Ancient One. The two passed through the portal, and Ancient One used the mirror space to hide them for the first time. Here. New York, right? Craft looked around at the surrounding environment and found that although the buildings were slightly different, they were still able to confirm their current location based on street signs and landmarks. After all, the Brooklyn Bridge, as one of New York's landmarks, is still very conspicuous. Can you contact Ancient One or Strange in this world? Craft turned to look at Ancient One, but saw that her expression was a little weird. What's wrong? This world doesn't seem to have me. Ancient One shrugged, not to mention her parallel world peers, she didn't even notice the existence of Holy Place in New York. However, this situation also made Ancient One breathe a sigh of relief in her heart. Since there is no Kamar Taj in this world, she doesn't have to worry about being caught by herself in this world and doing nothing. Even Ancient One fails to perceive hell in the dark dimension, which means that there is probably no need for Kamar Taj to maintain world peace in secret. Ease. This world is really so easy. Or I just settle here. The comfortable Ancient One couldn't help showing a smile, making Craft bewildered. Didn't it mean that Ancient One at this time might have already cooled down? So what is so happy about her? Craft couldn't understand what Ancient One was happy about. Anyway, let's go find me in this world first. Craft adjusted the coordinates on the portal gun and planned to go directly to the Lee's house in this world. After passing through the portal to his home location, Craft fell into contemplation. Who can tell him what is going on in this nightclub in front of him? Has Martin Lee in this world never seen a woman? Turn your home into a nightclub? Craft. Have you found one thing? Ancient One suddenly reminded. The architectural style of this world seems a bit old, it looks like New York 10 years ago. Due to frequent observation of time, Ancient One is easier to find these small details related to time. Wow. I didn't even find out if you didn't say. Craft took a look at the nearby shops and found that the TV set in it was actually based on that kind of old-fashioned picture tube. Angela, can you hack a nearby network? Craft knocked on the nearby earphones behind his ears. Wait a minute, the network bandwidth here is really terrible. I need some time. Angela replied angrily. Roar said that the current situation is worse than when she and Craft took the time machine to check Hydra. Even if Angela uses her own host to connect to the network here, it still cannot solve it. Turtle speed network problem. By the way, we can go to Stark Industries first. Uncle Tony's equipment has always been much more advanced than outside. Craft directly used the guiding cube to add a floating technique to himself, and then flew in the direction of the Stark building, which should not be the Avengers building yet. Where is the Stark Tower? What about the so big Stark Tower? Seeing the words MetLife on the top of the building in front of him, Craft couldn't help falling into thought. This world is too weird. It doesn't matter if you don't have Ancient One, you don't even have Stark. Craft was already sitting in a cold drink shop with Ancient One at this time, and while drinking a drink, while waiting for Angela to use the turtle speed network to provide them with information. What does it mean to forget it without me? Ancient One gave Craft a white look and bit the ice in his mouth into a crunch. After all, you Kamar Taj don't know many people. Stark is a world-renowned large company, Craft said plausibly. Speaking of large companies, I seem to have seen the Osborne Group logo just now. Before the voice of Ancient One was over, the TV news of the cold drink shop rang out about the Osborne Group. The general content is that after the death of Norman Osborn, the Osborne Group was accepted by his son Harry Osborn, but now the Osborne Group is precarious and the prospects are not very optimistic. Wow. Craft blinked and looked at the two unfamiliar faces on the TV. Harry and his son have even changed their appearances. They are indeed parallel worlds. At the moment, Angela's intelligence on the internet was almost collected. Brother, in this world, there seems to be only one superhero like Spider-Man. After Angela's explanation, Craft knew roughly what the world was like. There is Spider-Man, Green Goblin, and there are no traces of other superpowers. Not to mention S.H.I.E.L.D. Even the Red Skull and Hydra, which were very active during World War E, have never appeared. Naturally, there is no such thing as the spear game. Then Green Goblin chilled out a while ago and died at the hands of Spider-Man. In addition, although the Green Goblin style of this world is different, it is also ugly. It seems that no matter which world it is Norman Osborn, the taste and appearance design is very bad. This. Is it actually the script where Harry and Peter fell in love and killed each other? Craft couldn't help sighing. What a fate. Brother Peter's fate is more than this. Angela's gloating voice came from the headphones. The Daily Horn is still in the black Spider-Man as always. Well, it looks like a parallel world at last. Clough nodded. He finally found a sense of familiarity in Peter Parker. But looking at this, there is a high probability that there is no me in this world. Then the uncle in this world is mostly killed by Peter's cosplayer, Tisk. Craft smacked his lips uncomfortably. Can you find information about Peter Parker? No, even Spider-Man doesn't have much information, and most of it is published in the Clarion Daily. Angela is very dissatisfied with the current environment. The development of the internet in this world is really bad. I am not at all satisfied. I don't like it here. And it is obviously about 2,000 years. New York City doesn't even have a few surveillance cameras, and the world is quite magical. Since the scientific method doesn't work, you can only try magic. Craft looked at Ancient One. Do you have any way to find Peter Parker in this world? Ancient One swallowed the drink in his mouth and shrugged calmly. The difference between Peter Parker in this world and our world is too big. He originally didn't learn any magic, so I use astrology at most to help you determine a general direction. Craft glanced at Ancient One disgustingly, and even the Supreme Magician, but he couldn't find anyone. Then we can only wait for Spider-Man to appear. Science and magic seem to be useless, and Craft can only choose to try his luck. There is no feast homeless shelter in this world. He couldn't find Aunt May through this clue. First, he used Reality Gem to cast illusions to obscure the sight of nearby people. Craft sprinkled a group of stealth reconnaissance planes to set up a surveillance network throughout New York, waiting for the appearance of Spider-Man. There is not much difference between Peter Parker in the two worlds. They are both the kind of bad guys who like to be nosy, so not long after Craft's surveillance network was opened, Angela found the Spider-Man trail. Go. Craft stood up from his position and glanced at Ancient One. But Ancient One didn't have much friendship with Peter Parker. She was not interested in the Spider-Man in parallel time and space, so Ancient One waved her hand casually. Leave it alone, the drinks here are not bad, I want to try others tasteful. That's up to you. Kraft is not reluctant, anyway, Ancient One has the circled portal, it is too easy to find yourself, and for the convenience of contact, Kraft gave her a hidden headset of the same type a long time ago. Peter Parker, as always, shuttles between the high-rise buildings in New York. He defeated Green Goblin not long ago and saved New York City and Mary Jane, but found that Green Goblin was the father of his friend, which made him a little difficult to face. Harry. In addition, because of the identity of Spider-Man, his relationship with Mary Jane has also been problematic, so Peter has been in a low mood recently. However, even so, he still persisted in his work as a superhero, serving as a righteous policeman every day, fighting criminals, and by his own efforts, lowered the crime rate in New York. This is probably the only thing that can comfort Peter Parker recently. Cyclone. Joker. With a prelude similar to an electric guitar, a strange male electronic sound rang behind Peter Parker. Peter Parker quickly turned his head and saw a masked weird dressed half-green and half-black kicking towards him. Peter hurriedly pulled Cobweb to avoid the strange man's attack. As the two bodies crossed by, he felt a strong air current burst from the strange man's body. This is definitely not the normal wind pressure driven by the flying kick just now. Peter Parker absorbent was on the wall of a nearby building, staring cautiously at the weird man who suddenly attacked him. And after the half-black and half-green masked monster missed a hit, he turned somersault in the air and floated in the air facing Peter Parker. Only then did Peter have the time to look at the attacker. The attacker was wearing a half-green half-black ingrown leather jacket, with a W-shaped silver decoration on his forehead, and a red belt with an exaggerated shape that was also W-shaped around his waist. The eyes were bright red. The lenses looked like compound eyes like flies or locusts, and two silver ribbons on the back, which were not known as cloaks or scarves, were fluttering in the wind. Who are you? Why are you attacking me? But how weird the other party's costume is, just his ability to stand out of thin air is enough for Peter Parker to deal with it carefully. Kraft thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. Don't even know your brother? My stupid brother. Kraft didn't lie, he still had a recording of Peter Parker calling his good brother. Although his voice was different from the Peter Parker in front of him. Kraft's one-sided words definitely can't convince Peter Parker, not to mention that Peter clearly knows that he doesn't have any older brothers. Even if he does have an older brother, he would attack his younger brother as soon as he meets. I don't remember a brother like you who dare not meet anyone. Peter Parker in this world still has the same broken mouth. He spit out while launching Cobweb at Kraft. How about I send you to the police station and let the police find your brother for you? Don't you also veil your face and dare not meet people? It also shows that I am your brother, Peter Parker. Kraft avoided the cobweb shot by Peter, leaned low and rushed towards him, taking advantage of the gap created by Peter's identity, and punching him in the face. The beaten-up Peter Parker threw out Cobweb to stabilize his figure. He was shocked in his heart, but he quickly denied his identity. What Peter Parker? I don't know what you were talking about. Hey. Kraft sneered. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. Now, let me, the brother, weigh your weight. After speaking, Kraft rushed to Peter Parker again, punching him with his fist. Snapped. Peter raised his hand to support Kraft's fist, and using Kraft's arm as a fulcrum, a high whip leg swept his head. Kraft lowered his head to avoid Peter's attack, his right hand broke free of Peter's restraint, and an elbow hit his chest. Peter, who took a hard elbow, couldn't help venting his strength, and quickly fell to the ground, but he recovered quickly, shot a cobweb against the building next to him, and pulled himself back into the air again. However, it was Kraft's souls that greeted Peter. Although Peter instinctively dodged with the help of spider telepathy, he was still kicked in the shoulder by Kraft, and he flew out, smashed the windows of the building behind him, and fell into other people's homes. How should I finish it now? After hitting Peter into someone else's home, Kraft scratched his head awkwardly when he came back to his senses. From the beginning, he came to Peter Parker without any special purpose. He was just curious to see what his acquaintances in the world were like. Then, because of his friendship with Peter Parker in another world, Kraft habitually made a joke with him. As a result, this carelessness seemed a bit difficult to end. Kraft was distressed for less than 2 seconds, and decided to take one step as one step. The big deal was to run away without revealing his identity. Kraft, who was thinking this way, flew to the gap Peter had smashed into, and got in too. Gosh. It's Spider-Man. The hostess of the house rushed to hear the sound and screamed at the figure lying in her kitchen. Sorry, ma'am, I hope your house has insurance. Compared with Peter Parker of Kraft World, the Spider-Man here is definitely a poor ghost, and there is no shield in the Avengers to treat him, so it is impossible for him to compensate the owner of the loss. Fortunately, most people living in this area are middle-class people. Naturally, housing insurance is in place, and Peter is not required to pay compensation. After getting a positive reply from the owner, Peter was greatly relieved. Does Peter in this world have such a miserable life? Kraft, who entered through Peter's smashed window, just heard the conversation between him and the owner of the house, and couldn't help but twitched his mouth, but the play was still going on. With a light step on his feet, Kraft's figure flashed, and he continued to attack Peter. Hurry up and hide. Peter yelled to the owner, who was still standing stupidly, and then rushed up to fight Kraft. Two people come and go, tumbling up and down in this small house, tearing down the entire kitchen. After Kraft's preliminary test, Angela has compiled the basic physical data of Peter Parker in this world. From the basic physical data alone, there is not much difference between Peter in the two worlds, but Peter in this world does not have the battlesuit bonus that Kraft made for him, and his strength is naturally much weaker. In addition to basic strength, Peter in this world is also quite poor in combat. Even if Kraft limits his power and speed to the same level as him, he can still rely on his combat experience polished from the streets. Suppress Peter. However, Kraft can also understand that from the current point of view, there are very few super users in this world. In addition to hitting a green goblin, the Spider-Man in front of him is usually catching a thief, hitting a robber, etc. Even the underworld bigwigs like Jinbin have never encountered it. In this environment, Peter relies on spider telepathy and strong physical fitness to cope with most situations. The Spider-Man in another world not only often deals with super criminals, but also participates in the large-scale war against alien invasion. It can't deal with these powerful opponents only by relying on its own mutation. So Peter Parker in that world not only has rich fighting experience, but also learned some fighting techniques that suit him. It is definitely something to be stronger. After fought with Peter Parker for a while, determined his strength, and by the way, completely dismantled this hapless kitchen, Kraft increased his strength and speed, and punched Peter Parker. Abdomen. Peter, who received this punch, suddenly felt the difference. Compared with this punch, the previous attack was like a fight between friends. The severe pain from his abdomen even made his eyes darken involuntarily. He clutched his stomach and knelt down on the ground. After a while, Peter eased from the pain. He raised his head and looked at the mysterious figure who had attacked him, secretly wondering why he didn't pursue the victory and continue to attack him. Do you only have this level? You really disappointed me. Kraft pretended to sigh, then ignored Peter Parker, who was still on his knees, and turned to the window. With your strength, who can be protected? Kraft, who stepped on the edge of the window, turned his head, and after dropping this sentence, he jumped out of the hole in the window. Wait. What do you mean? Peter endured the pain in his abdomen and ran after him to the window, only to find that the half-black and half-green weird had already disappeared. In fact, Kraft didn't mean anything, it was purely because he couldn't think of any good excuses to let Peter go. He didn't know how to act anymore, so he just learned the lines from TV series and cartoons and came up with such a sentence. Maybe under his own stimulation, Peter Parker in this world will take the initiative to exercise his ability, and any problems encountered in the future will not be unable to solve because of insufficient ability. Thinking about it this way, Kraft felt that he had done a great thing. This is definitely something for the future, and the current situation is. The next day, the front page headline of the Clarion Daily: the houses of innocent citizens were destroyed, and the good neighbor, Spider-Man, was defeated. The content of the news roughly means that Spider-Man was not only beaten up by a mysterious person, but also refused to compensate the property of the ordinary people affected. The so-called superhero is actually a joke. In short, the Clarion Daily is always trying all kinds of ways to demean Spider-Man, and there is nothing good about Kraft's Kamen Rider W. But Kraft didn't care about it. He didn't plan to stay in this world for long. He was leaving after seeing Aunt May and a few acquaintances. What does it matter? After the buggy that night, Kraft has been using a stealth reconnaissance plane to monitor Peter in this world. Like everyone else, the appearance of the two Spider-Mons is different, and Peter here is a bit older. In addition, he did not live with Aunt May, but found a small rental house outside by himself, which made Kraft wait for several days before seeing Aunt May in this world. The two Spider-Mons have the same thing. They both make extra money by selling their photos to the Daily Horn. Peter in this world is actually making money by delivering pizza. He was really blinded by his Imperial University diploma, and he didn't know what he was thinking. But he wants to sell cobweb technology like Peter in Kraft world is not realistic, because Peter's cobweb in this world is directly generated in the body, and then ejected from the wrist. Ordinary spiders, cobweb, don't all come out of the ass? Aunt May, I came to see you. Peter Parker opened the door and walked into Aunt May's house. Huh. There are guests at home? As soon as he entered the living room, Peter saw a young Asian man chatting with Aunt May. "Oh, Peter, you are here." Aunt May stood up and introduced to the two with a smile. "This is Kraft Lee. I only helped him a little yesterday, but he came home with a gift today." Aunt May's tone was a little helpless. She shied away for a long time, but could not persuade Kraft to take back the gift. "His name is Peter Parker and he is my nephew." "Hello." Kraft nodded flatly to Peter. "Hello." Peter Parker is much more cautious. Obviously Kraft is younger than him, but he looks very uncomfortable. No matter how you look at it, Peter Parker in this world is a lot worse, probably because he just became a Spider-Man not long ago, and he still retains the inferiority complex when he was an ordinary person. In fact, Kraft didn't understand that Peter Parker, as a top student with excellent grades, would be bullied by some sports students when he was in school. Kraft definitely hasn't experienced any campus bullying, so maybe he just can't stand and talk, but the Peter Parker he knows was bullied by Lightning Thompson at school, and his personality hasn't become as bad as the Peter in front of him. Casually chatting with this Peter Parker, Kraft found that there were more and more differences between the two Peters, and the sense of strangeness was getting heavier, so he gradually lost the interest in continuing to communicate with him, so he looked for an excuse to get up and leave. Anyway, he put some potions to improve the physique in the gift he gave to Aunt May. The main purpose has been achieved, and there is no reason to stay here. As for the identity of Kamen Rider W, let Peter Parker worry about it himself, it doesn't hurt anyway.
Save the coordinates of this world first, and then come and have a look when you have time.
Kraft took out the portal gun, pressed it a few times, and then his movements suddenly froze. "What's wrong? Don't you want to go back?" Ancient One, who had changed into a white lady's suit, saw Kraft suddenly froze, and asked curiously. "Then what?" Kraft turned his neck stiffly and said to Ancient One with a weeping face, "I seem to forget to save the coordinates of the original world." "What do you mean? We can't go back." Ancient One pressed his temples, feeling the buzzing pain of his brain. "What about the Earth? Odin is dead and we are not here. If Thanos invades the Earth, no one will resist him." Even if it was Ancient One, at this moment, he couldn't help but roared at Kraft this scam. "The situation is not that bad." Kraft quickly calmed down. "Most of my fleet is still in that world. Angela has the control of all fleets, and O'Reilly is also here. Thanos, no questionable." It's okay if Kraft doesn't say anything. When he talks about O'Reilly, Ancient One feels that his brain hurts even more. "Are you sure to leave the matter to O'Reilly to solve? The Earth won't get worse?" "No problem. O'Reilly is a good boy." Kraft confidently gave Ancient One a thumbs up. "Where does your confidence come from?" Ancient One twitched the corners of his mouth, not wanting to pick it up at all. So she changed the subject directly. "Then how are we going back? Would you show me the space gem for a try?" "Don't be so troublesome." Kraft raised his gun and fired a shot at the open space next to him. "It's good to try one by one, just to go around and see a different self." Ancient One thought for a while. Although Thanos without infinite gems is strong, but Strange with time gem is not without the power of a battle, plus that magical O'Reilly. Thanos wants to get benefits on Earth, it also seems to be more difficult. "Alright, I will play with you everywhere. Anyway, she has retired. Even if the Earth is accidentally broken by O'Reilly, that would be Strange's business." Thinking about it this way, Ancient One felt a lot easier at once, and followed Kraft into the green portal. Woo woo woo. As soon as Kraft and Ancient One passed through the portal, they heard a sharp siren sound from outside. The two looked around and found that their location was actually inside a bank. Judging from the movements they heard from outside, it seemed that they happened to have encountered someone robbing the bank, and these robbers had been blocked by the police. This business ability doesn't work. Kraft curled his lips speechlessly, and somehow he took the money and ran out a few streets, and he was blocked in the bank. These robbers were too hip, right? Then something that made Kraft even more speechless happened. A familiar figure suddenly crawled in from the high window next to him, and one turned over and fell in front of Kraft and Ancient One. Sheesh. Because of Kraft's age and Ancient One's gender, the Spider-Man didn't mistake them for the robbers' accomplices, but thought they were hostages who had escaped the robbers' search. "You stay here and don't move, I'll go out and solve the robbers outside." Although Peter Parker was a little surprised as to why the two of them were so calm, he calmed down quietly. Then he saw that younger teenager stretched out his hand to cover his face, and sighed, "Ni Yuan." Peter Parker. Kraft wasn't interested in reminiscing about the old with Peter Parker, so he opened a new portal and dived in. Peter Parker. Walking out of the portal again, Kraft found himself standing on the top of a building, and not far away, a kid in a spider suit was pulling his headgear off. FXXK. Kraft couldn't help but explode. The Spider-Man who was also standing on the top of the building was taken aback by Kraft's sudden voice, and his face changed greatly after seeing Kraft and Ancient One. Ah. No, no. Don't get me wrong. I'm just a Spider-Man fan. I was just at cosplay just now. The Spider-Man, who was a little younger than Kraft, waved his hands again and again, defending himself like a machine gun with his mouth. You have become black. Peter. The black guy in front of me uttered too fast, and Kraft couldn't hear it very clearly. He just felt that anything could happen in the parallel world, and Peter Parker had even changed his race. Wait, you know Peter? Miles Morales, who was racking his brains to hide his identity, was taken aback when he heard the words, and then looked at Kraft suspiciously. If these two were Peter's friends, then you shouldn't know that Peter has sacrificed things. Who the hell are you? Well, there are other Spider-Man. Kraft didn't know that Peter in this world was dead, he just felt that the portal gun in his hand was not poisonous. Too lazy to pay attention to Miles' questioning, Kraft opened a new portal again and rushed to Ancient One to call Roar. Go, go, it's a hell. At the other end of the portal, there is a Spider-Man woman wearing a black and white tights and a white hood. Ha 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 ha. Ancient One burst into laughter disregarding its image, and looked at Kraft with a smelly face with a teasing expression on his face. This situation is really interesting. Did I fall into the spider's den? Kraft is almost torn apart. Peter Parker with different looks, Spider-Man with different identity, African-American Spider-Man, female Spider-Man. Will there be an LGBT Spider-Man and small animals next? Spider-Man come to join a Rainbow Spider-Man team. Kraft didn't understand the thoughts of the female Spider-Man in front of him. He directly used the reality gem to confuse the Spider-Gwen's vision, and then threw the portal gun in his hand to Ancient One, who had already laughed in tears. Try it for you. This is so evil. If it is in terms of distance, then I should also appear near Martin Lee. What the hell is a bunch of Peter Parker? And the black guy before and the Spider-Girl I'm encountering now is obviously not Peter Parker. Well, how do you use this thing? Ancient One wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, randomly selected a new coordinate under Kraft's guidance, and then used a technology product to open a portal for the first time. So while Spider-Gwen was looking for the two people who had just appeared and disappeared just now, Kraft and Ancient One had already got into the portal and left this parallel time and space. It's a big night again. Kraft, who walked out of the portal, rubbed his chin while looking at the dark sky around him. When will I go to other parallel worlds to get the time gem, and add a time locking function to my portal gun? Otherwise the time will change from time to time and it will be quite annoying. But then again, where is this? After determining the direction for the next improvement of the portal gun, Kraft looked at the surrounding environment again. He doesn't care about anything else, he just wants to see if he will encounter Spider-Man again. Kraft hated Peter Parker for the first time in his life. Judging from the surrounding buildings, they seem to be in a manor, and the environment of the manor seems to be pretty good, probably not an ordinary big family. Especially after Angela used the stars in the sky to locate them still near New York, Kraft was even more certain. It's amazing to have such a large private estate in New York, even in suburban areas. At this moment, Ancient One beside Kraft suddenly gave a cold snort, and then quickly moved his hand a few times. It's not a polite behavior to read another person's memory without saying a word. Ancient One cast his gaze into the darkness deep in the manor quietly. Kraft glanced at Ancient One and didn't demolish her platform. Obviously you did such a shit yourself. If you offend you, I am deeply sorry, but the two of you came uninvited, so I have to take precautions. After all, there are still many children in there who need my protection. A gentle male voice that can make most people angry for the first time rang from the direction Ancient One looked over, and then an old white man in a wheelchair slowly revealed his figure from the dark. Kraft glanced at Ancient One again, but this time his gaze moved slightly upward, looking at the top of Ancient One's head, which had been planted with a layer of platinum hair. It's not because of anything else, it's simply that this old man who appeared suddenly has a shiny brain like the old Ancient One. Ancient One obviously understood the meaning of Kraft's gaze. She glared at Kraft and then turned her gaze to Charles again. We just passed by inadvertently and have no malice against you. Ancient One didn't plan to continue dealing with Charles, so he drew a portal and pulled Kraft out of here. Professor. Where did the intruder just now go? Until Kraft and Ancient One left, Jean Grey and other talents were long overdue. They received Charles's notice early, but they had been in the student dormitory to protect the young mutants in the Xavier Genius Academy. Nothing big, it shouldn't be the enemy. Charles didn't want their nerves to be too tight, and he did not feel the hostility from Ancient One and Kraft. They should have accidentally entered here while using ability. It's mutant. Professor, why don't you keep them? Cyclops asked puzzledly. Mutant is not the only one with special abilities, Kurt. Charles shook his head. He could feel that the two of them weren't mutant before, so he didn't speak to keep them. Well, it's all gone. Charles waved his hand, not intending to continue the subject. Eric's recent moves are a bit abnormal, and he is the one we need to pay more attention to. After leaving Xavier Genius Academy, Kraft and Ancient One did not rush to leave here. One is that Kraft is still wondering if there will be a Spider-Man in this world, and the other is that after traveling through so many worlds in succession, Kraft is also a little tired. He plans to rest here. Fortunately, the level of science and technology in this world is fairly advanced, and Angela has a lot easier access to information. How do you say? People in this world, don't they have any problems with their brains? After reading the information collected by Angela, Kraft looked dazed. Mutant is discriminated against by the mainstream and subject to official control. In fact, Kraft can understand it. After all, in his own world, those superhero and mutants have had similar experiences. It's just that the official methods of this world are really bad. If Nick Fury's black marinated egg is used, most mutants will probably become official thugs. A small number of people who don't take control will either go to jail or become experimental materials, and most mutants. I have to thank him. Then Charles, who is also bald, has a brain hole. He clearly has the power to wrestle the wrist with American officials, but he only thinks about peace talks. He keeps backing down on many issues. To be honest, Mutant will fall to where he is now. He should at least bear most of the responsibility. The Kraft familiar Magneto is even more extreme, but if he doesn't want to outperform ordinary humans, but seeks coexistence like Charles, in fact, his way of action is more likely to be effective. It's not like that. Seeking peace through struggle will lead to peace, and seeking peace through compromise will lead to peace. Kraft felt that Charles should take a look at Mauzan and other materials, or one day Mutant would be brought to the point where he and Magneto were two people who were like pros and cons. But what will happen to Mutant in the future? Kraft is actually not very concerned. Although there are some pity for their experience, Kraft feels that only some information is not enough to make him stand on Mutant's side. And not all mutants seek to coexist like X-Men. There are actually many mutants who hold the same views as Magneto. If Kraft wants to help Mutant, then this problem must be solved. However, this kind of problem cannot be solved in a short time. Even if the problem of means and the subsequent impact are not considered, Kraft estimates that it will take at least a few years. He still has to find his own way back. How can there be time? This is waste. Although Angela and Aurelie are there, Kraft feels that his world can't cause any major problems, but he doesn't have enough money to stay here for years or even decades to help a group of unknown guys solve this kind of social problem. Kraft only intends to delay a little bit of time in this world, at most while collecting the adamantium that interests him, and at the same time, if he encounters something that is not pleasing to the eye, he will help him. Regarding the whereabouts of adamantium, it is not so easy to find. Adamantium is an excellent and scarce material, and the relevant information is tightly hidden. Anyway, Angela could not find its specific location in the official regular database, but occasionally mentioned a sentence in some documents, or applied to the above for a part of adamantium for research. But this doesn't bother Kraft. If he is willing to wait slowly, Angela will be able to dig out the whereabouts of adamantium and even the formula sooner or later. And even if Kraft is more urgent now, he has other ways to find adamantium. Such as Ancient One's astrology. It happened that Kraft hadn't seen how to use astrology to find things, so he went to Ancient One and asked her to help. It doesn't matter if I help you fortune-telling. Ancient One looked at the surrounding instruments that surrounded itself 3 layers inside and outside 3 layers, and asked with a black line on his face, "What's the matter with these machines? Oh, am I not able to learn magic? I just plan to see if I can analyze it with technology, and then simulate the fluctuations when casting magic, and create a tool that can perform magic." Kraft was not on a sudden whim, but had already had such an idea. After all, he already had a successful case like a force guide in his hand, and he naturally wanted to develop a science magic item himself. It's just that Kraft either didn't have time, or Ancient One didn't have time, or he just forgot. In short, I have never met the right time to find Ancient One to cooperate with my experiment, and now it just happened to happen, and he just happened to remember it again. Ancient One rolled his eyes speechlessly, and started divination among the mess of instruments very cooperatively. Under normal circumstances, divination has corresponding requirements for the layout of the venue, the choice of time, and the related objects of the target, but for a big guy like Ancient One, these things are not necessary. Meet the requirements. The result of definitely will be more precise and clear, but it doesn't matter if the requirements are not met. Ancient One can still guarantee the accuracy, but the specific information will be relatively vague. When Ancient One was performing astrology, Kraft's instrument also collected abnormally fluctuating data, but the data this time was of no use, and Kraft only asked Angela, "Collect it first." The development of technology magic items is not in a hurry, and it is still in the stage of data collection. Ancient One finished the divination and slowly opened his eyes. The result of divination is that we need to find someone first. He has a clue of adamantium alloy, she said, pointing to the southwest. We are going to find him here. How is it a person? Kraft, who doesn't understand astrology, despised. You can't directly divination to the destination, you supreme magician doesn't look very good. Ancient One was too lazy to argue with this ignorant bear kid, and directly drew a portal and walked in. Kraft hurriedly put away those instruments, and then got into the portal. Where is this? After walking out of the portal, Kraft looked around and asked. I don't know, but the person who knows adamantium should be nearby. Okay. Then what does he look like? Astrology is not omnipotent. Ancient One rolled his eyes. I only know that it is a wolf-like man. Wolf-like man? Werewolf? Are there vampires? For the first time, Kraft thought of the vampire culture that is particularly popular in Europe and America. To be honest, in the original world, he knew that there are things like hell, and he was strange if there were no vampires or something. I haven't found any traces of magic in this world. Ancient One spread his hands, so there are probably no such things as werewolves. This is unscientific. Kraft frowned. In fact, he felt something was wrong before. The Spider-Man world Ancient One also said that no magic was found, but she didn't have any obstacles when using magic. If there is no difference in magic between these parallel worlds, why have they failed to develop a magic system? If these parallel worlds don't have so-called magic elements, then why can Ancient One use the original spells? Whenever he thought that every time he practiced those spells in his dream, he didn't respond at all, Kraft felt that it was particularly unfair. Although these messy technologies are also very good right now, he still wants to cultivate immortals. This is magic, definitely unscientific. Ancient One didn't know what Kraft was thinking about again, so he reminded him. Are you still looking for adamantium? Oh yes, I almost forgot. Kraft patted his forehead. Now is not the time to struggle with these things. Anyway, I can come back to these worlds to study slowly. It is serious to get adamantium first, and then find the coordinates to go back. But where is the wolf-like man you were talking about? Ancient One curled up his mouth. Isn't this here? At the same time, the wall beside them suddenly broke open, and two muscular men rushed out of them hugging each other and rolled into a ball on the ground. It's so spicy. A little girl who was about the same age as Kraft also walked out of the gap in the wall, looking anxiously at the two people who were inextricably beaten on the ground, feeling like they wanted to but dare not. This is the wolf-like man you were talking about? When Kraft's voice sounded, Xiao Nadi realized that there were other people beside her. Only a man and a woman were watching the battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth very calmly, and they were still making comments. It's not so much a wolf. It's more like a tiger or a leopard, both of them. Canines usually rely on teeth to attack, and cats use paws. As a scientist, Kraft felt that the information dictated by Ancient One was inaccurate. And judging from the appearance of his pair of claws, the most suitable animal image is actually a sloth or an armadillo. From the metal claws pierced from Wolverine's hands, Kraft also figured out who Ancient One was referring to in the divination. Compared with the other, it was indeed more like a wolf. Are you also under Magneto? Xiao Nadi took 2 steps back with a guarded look, and stared at the two passers-by whose reactions were obviously wrong. Magneto, Eric? Kraft thought for a while and replied, I know him, but I haven't met him, but I know his son and daughter. What? Magneto actually has a son and a daughter. Victor looked at Kraft with a look of surprise, and he didn't care about fighting with his old friend Logan. He and Magneto were old acquaintances, and he always thought he was a lonely old man. Yes, I have a sister who has a good relationship with his son Pietro. Kraft nodded solemnly, and the Ancient One who was looking aside rolled his eyes. This bear kid's ability to speak nonsense is getting better and better. If he didn't know Pietro and Wanda, he would really believe it if he didn't say it well. Skirt. Did you hear that? Storm Orlo lowered his voice and elbowed Cyclops next to him. Facing Storm's question, Cyclops nodded, the special glasses on his face obscured his horrified eyes. Kurt, who followed Professor X a long time ago, thinks he knows Magneto better, but he has never heard the professor mention that Magneto has children. Then. Do you say this is true? Gossip is one of the essence of human beings, and Orlo is still very curious about Magneto's children. Maybe. The professor will know. Kurt hesitated for a moment before speaking slowly. After expressing their amazement at Magneto having a child, the two X-Men finally returned their minds to business. According to Charles's instructions, they wanted to take the mutant girl into Xavier's Academy of Talented Youth and protect her to prevent Magneto from finding her. Although Charles still doesn't know what Magneto's conspiracy is to find mischief, Charles knows his old friend very well. He is an old man who is always thinking about making troubles. Anyway, he just has to fight against him. It's you again. Victor, as Magneto's capable man, has not played against X-Men once or twice. Naturally, he recognizes Storm and Cyclops. With these two people joining, together with Logan, who is inseparable from his own victory and defeat, he wants to bring I'm afraid it's impossible to be naughty. Thinking of this, Victor raised his mind to retreat, but before he left, he still didn't forget to provoke Logan, his good brother who had lost his memory. Looking forward to seeing you next time, Logan. Victor pressed his words hard, and with his feet, a vertical leap over the low wall on the side of the street disappeared. Logan, who wanted to figure out his identity, was about to catch up, but was stopped by Orlo and Kurt. You have been targeted by a very dangerous person. It's best to go back with us. I don't know why, it's the first time Kurt sees Wolverine, but he doesn't like him, so his tone is also a bit blunt. Facing this kind of suspected provocative behavior, Wolverine's reaction was very simple. He directly extended his pair of wolf claws, slightly lowered. And Kurt also put his finger on the switch of the special glasses, and only waited for Logan to pounce on him. He shot him hard. Okay. See Kurt. We didn't come here to fight. Storm interrupted the confrontation between the two in time and invited. I am Orlo Monroe from Xavier Genius Youth Academy. This is Kurt. We are not malicious. We just want to take you to our school. To protect you. The name of Xavier Genius Youth Academy is still a bit famous in the mutant group, and the little naughty has naturally heard of it, but... She looked at Logan, who was staring at each other with Cyclops. On the way, Logan is not so good-tempered, but he takes good care of himself, and he is the only person who can be touched by himself but will be fine, so little naughty's perception of him is actually quite complicated. Perceiving the mischievous gaze, Logan retracted his gaze from the fight with Cyclops. After hesitation for a while, he still agreed. She was right. Xavier Academy is a good place. You don't need to keep following me outside. Endure hardship. Moreover, without the oil bottle of little naughty, if he encounters any danger while searching for his memory, he will not be as constrained as he was just now. There is no need to say something like definitely. Logan still has this emotional intelligence. But just like little naughty relied on Logan, Wolverine couldn't let her go so easily now, so he proposed to go to Xavier Academy with little naughty, confirming that she can be better taken care of in school to be relieved. Storm definitely won't refuse such a small request. They are not only admitting mutant students. Adult mutants like Logan and Charles are also very welcome. So although Cyclops was a little unhappy, he just curled his lips and didn't object. Kraft, who had been waiting for the end of the matter all the time, quit. He also planned to ask this uncle with strong hair to ask about adamantium alloy. Wait. Before you go, I want to ask him something. Kraft joined the conversation, and he didn't go around the corners, and straight to the point. Do you know where you can get this kind of adamantium on you? Adamantium. Logan, who has lost his memory, can't remember the names of these magical metals in his body, let alone their origins. Do you know what this is? Wolverine was very excited, and dashed forward to Kraft, clasping his shoulders with both hands. The moment Wolverine's hands pinched Kraft's shoulders, it triggered the stress device on the dream armor, and a layer of black biological armor quickly covered his body, blocking Wolverine's pair of iron-like hands. And after he got dressed, Kraft punched Logan's face with a reflexive fist, deflating his head, and knocking him out. Logan's body smashed through 3 walls in a row before stopping, and then with a bang, his corpse was completely buried by the collapsed house. It's none of my business. He attacked me first. Kraft shook the blood from his fist, stunned the surroundings, Storm and the others said, and at the same time looked angrily at Ancient One. What is your astrology? Not reliable at all. The meaning of this look was too obvious. Ancient One understood it all at once, but she didn't want to take it back. It was obviously Kraft who defeated the clue with a punch herself. What's the matter with her former supreme magician? Not to mention, that Wolverine is not dead yet. Ancient One looked at the house that had just collapsed, and the breath that was about to dissipate was rapidly increasing. Then with a roar, Logan raised a pair of steel claws and stood up from the ruins. Is it regenerative healing factor again? Kraft's expression was a bit weird. No wonder that after this person was accidentally beaten to death by himself, none of his companions had any too fierce reactions. Walking out of the ruins, Logan's eyes were bloodshot, staring at Kraft, roar, roar, for a long time. In the end, it was more important to find his identity. He suppressed the headshot anger. After calming down, he came to Kraft again and asked again, do you know what metal is in my body? Since he almost killed Logan by mistake, Kraft, who felt owed, told him about adamantium very cooperatively, and he was also watching Wolverine's reaction. In the less important official database, there is not much information about adamantium alloy. Except for the late scientist who accidentally synthesized adamantium alloy, There are only a list of applications for adamantium alloy. As for what they applied for, whether it is approved or not, it is not mentioned in the database. Fortunately, adamantium alloy does not seem to be any public material in the official internal. There are not too many people who know and apply for it, and many of them are repeated applications. Otherwise, it is estimated that Kraft's name will have to be reported for a while. Finally, when Kraft reported the name, William Stryker, Wolverine suddenly reacted. After a period of wailing that fits the recovery memory, Logan, sweating profusely, spit out the name of a place, Lake Alkali. After letting Angela locate Alkali Lake, Kraft took out the portal gun, entered the coordinates she provided, and opened the portal to Alkali Lake. Want to go see it together? Kraft invited Logan. Logan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Storm next to him couldn't help but said, "Can we go together too?" Whether it's the battlesuit that Kraft suddenly put on before, or the portal gun he is using now, they are all magical technologies beyond Storm's cognition. Compared with these two things, Charles's brainwave intensifier seems to count as well. What a big deal. Vigilant and curious, Storm felt it necessary to follow these two mysterious characters to figure out who they were and what they wanted to do. Random. Kraft didn't care about this, anyway he just wanted to find adamantium alloy, nothing else matters. So a group of people drove through the green portal to Alkali Lake in Logan's mouth. It's actually true. Cyclops looked around in amazement, and the locator on his body told him that he had come to Canada from America, thousands of miles away. It's not that mutant who doesn't have the ability to teleport, but most of them can only teleport over a short distance. I have never heard of this kind of thing that is thousands of kilometers in one flight, not to mention that the boy in front of me is still using something famous technology. After arriving at Alkali Lake, Wolverine could feel a touch of familiarity, but it was too erratic to recall accurately. This is where adamantium is. Kraft looked at Ancient One, only to find that her face was a bit horrible. What's wrong? It's rare to see Ancient One with such an ugly expression, Kraft asked curiously. However, Ancient One did not answer his question, but silently opened a portal, revealing everything that is creepy in the Stryker laboratory. Human experiment. Seeing the sightseeing scene on the other side of the portal, Kraft's pupils shrank suddenly, and a smile appeared on his face. Sure enough. No matter which world it is, there is such rubbish. Dream armor quickly covered Kraft's body, and he walked into the portal with a sullen face. My lord. The little naughty took 2 steps back, covering her mouth. This is really too exciting for a little girl like her. Most of the people in the laboratory have the characteristics of mutant on their bodies, but most of them have now become cold corpses, and a few of them have become so angry because of excessive torture, they may die at any time. Kraft came to the mutants who were still alive, stuck a syringe from his hand armor, and injected the repair fluid into their bodies. With the injection of the repair fluid, the roar sucks of the mutants gradually became stronger, and the wounds on their bodies were healing quickly, but Kraft only temporarily treated some traumas, and there were still various medicines in their bodies. Need to be ruled out as soon as possible. Kraft took out several treatment cabins from the universal capsule and placed them on the open space, and put these mutants in. Wolverine and the others also quietly walked over to help, clearing up more space for Kraft to place treatments. Cabin. An Ancient One also opened more portals and rescued the mutants who were scattered and imprisoned. How dare they? After talking with several mutants who were still sane, Storm was so angry that the whole person was trembling, and even his own ability was somewhat out of control, and a gust of wind blew indoors. Orala, calm down. Charles's voice suddenly rang in Storm's head, making her sober. Professor. I already know what happened, and now the most important thing is to transfer our compatriots back safely. Stryker's base uses a technology similar to the Magneto helmet, which can usually block Charles' telepathy's detection. It was not until the Ancient One's portal opened a hole here that Charles noticed it through the brainwave intensifier. After learning about this base, Charles's anger was definitely not less than Cyclops, but he cared more about the lives of his compatriots. At the same time, Charles also discovered that the 2 mysterious people who had invaded Stryker base with Storm were the 2 mysterious people who had suddenly appeared in the school 2 days ago. Although these 2 people are not mutants, it can be seen from their actions that they are not malicious, so after cautiously using telepathy to contact Ancient One, Charles asked her to open a portal to Xavier Academy for convenience. They rescued. Naturally, Ancient One would not refuse such a request. She opened another huge amounts of portal for people from Xavier Academy to transfer those mutants. When Charles arranged for the transfer of mutant from the Stryker base, Kraft had already visited the entire base based on the map and location provided by Angela, sending all the researchers there to meet. Got it. But what makes Kraft very strange is that, except for some ordinary armed personnel, there seems to be no security force in the entire base. Compared with the scale and function of this base, it seems a bit out of sync. In addition, Angela was unable to find William Stryker in the base. It seemed that she was not there. So Kraft could only find the place where Stryker stored adamantium. According to Angela's information, once adamantium was smelted and cooled, it could not be smelted again, that is to say, there was only one chance to shape it. In this way, this thing is useless. Kraft was extremely disappointed. The liquid metal of the T-1000 was not very resistant. He originally thought it could be replaced by adamantium, but it turned out to be this result. But Wolverine can stretch out adamantium alloy paws from the body, which is obviously in contradiction with the information. After thinking about it, Kraft first collected the liquid adamantium in front of him, and planned to take it back and study it slowly. Since Wolverine can generate steel claws, adamantium must have the shapeshifting attribute, but it has not found irregularity for the time being. After packing up adamantium and all the information in the base, Kraft returned to Ancient One and found that there were two more guys he didn't know. One is a woman with an Asian face, and the other is a thin white male sitting in a wheelchair. He looks a little silly, as if he has some intellectual problems. They are mutant. She has a similar experience to Logan. She was injected with adamantium alloy and was also controlled by Stryker. This is Stryker's son, but his brain is seriously damaged and he has no autonomy. Ancient One has lifted the mind control from the dead woman, but Jason Stryker's problem, she has no choice but to use Kamar Taj's spells to recover some incurable injuries, but it needs to be driven by personal will. A semi-vegetative person like Jason Stryker who has lost his personal will and can only have some basic reactions to the outside world has nothing to do. And because the Phantom Master had been left with a brain damage for too long, he had already reacted to the soul level, and even if he wanted to change his body, it would have no effect. Briefly explain the situation of the two to Kraft. Jason Stryker is still in the state of cerebral thrombosis, and the dead woman who regained consciousness bowed to Kraft very respectfully. Fold your hands on your abdomen, with your upper body parallel to the ground, and bow at a standard 90 degrees perpendicular to your legs. Oh. The Neon Man. This action, this habit, is so easy to recognize. Kraft nodded casually as a response, and then looked to the side. Charles wants to talk to you. Those mutants had been sent to Xavier Academy through the portal, but Storm and Cyclops did not leave. Instead they were waiting for Kraft and Ancient One. Originally, Kraft planned to leave the world after he got adamantium, but after learning about the situation at the base, he planned to kill William Stryker first, otherwise his thoughts would not be clear. Looking at Ancient One again, seeing that she didn't mean to object, Kraft agreed to Charles's invitation. After all, he didn't know much about William Stryker, so it's better to ask someone to ask first. Although it is possible to directly ask Angela to find William Stryker's location and open the portal to kill him, Kraft felt that it would be too cheap for him. In the meeting room of the Xavier Genius Academy, Charles led his X-Men, Kraft and Ancient One in a circle, in addition to Wolverine and Deathgirl who just joined today. Thank you very much for your help. Charles first expressed his gratitude to Kraft and Ancient One. Thanks to you, my compatriots did not continue to be brutally attacked by Stryker. So, what is the matter with that Stryker? Kraft now only wants to troubleshoot this neurosis, and asks straight to the subject. I only know that he is a pioneer against mutant, but it is too pathological to lock a group of mutants for human experiments? For this question, not only Kraft, X-Men also wanted to know. They all turned their attention to Charles. Charles sighed softly and began to tell everyone the story of Stryker's house. Things in Stryker's family are not complicated. His son Jason Stryker killed his mother, William Stryker's wife, because he couldn't control his ability when he was young. From then on, William Stryker hated mutant, thinking that mutant was a monster that shouldn't appear in the world, and transformed his son into a semi-vegetable man who only knew how to obey orders. And William Stryker implemented a X-weapon project, long ago, and Wolverine Logan was his experiment. About this matter, it was provided by Koyama Yuriko, a dead woman who recovered her consciousness, because her father was the scientist who was responsible for the development of the metal bone modification technique, and the adamantium in Logan was injected by her father. Many years ago, when Logan escaped from the laboratory of Weapon Project X, he slaughtered many researchers who stayed there. Koyama Yuriko's father was one of them. This is also the reason why Yuriko accepted Stryker's transformation, but she didn't expect Stryker to deceive her. While transforming her, she used the brain fluid of Master Illusion to control her, turning her into a person who only knew to obey orders. Puppet. So that Yuriko doesn't have the thought of finding Wolverine revenge, because compared to Wolverine, the person Yuriko hates more is William Stryker. For this matter, Kraft felt that her father deserved it. Anyway, in Kraft's eyes, all people who conduct human experiments, unless the subject is only himself, otherwise they deserve to die. For Stryker's experience, Kraft didn't even have any sympathy at all. His son killed his wife. Whether Stryker chose to forgive his son or give up his son or even seek revenge on his son, Kraft felt that he was forgiven, but he projected hatred on the entire mutant group. Outrageous. According to Stryker's theory, Kraft should kill all blacks and whites, leaving only the yellow race on the Earth. But Kraft didn't intend to kill him just like that, because for Stryker, he couldn't find mutant for revenge, and only watched them get better and better. This was the greatest pain. So Kraft decided to stay in this world for a while, help mutant, and then kill William Stryker before leaving the world. I have copied all the information in the Alkali Lake base. Let's disseminate this matter first and take advantage of public opinion. This is only the first step. Based on the experience of Bruce Banner's father-in-law in the original world, Kraft knew that doing so would not have much impact on a powerful officer. He did this, just wanting to change mutant's current situation first, because for Stryker, the better mutant gets along, the more uncomfortable he will be. But this is back to the earlier question. How did mutant get to this point? If this problem is not solved, even if mutant temporarily gains the advantage of public opinion, it will return to where it is before long, and it may even be worse. Although Kraft must have gone back by then, and mutant has nothing to do with him, but the variants that were caught for human experiments like him still made him feel compassionate. As for what he can achieve, Kraft is actually not very confident, but fortunately, there is an elder ancient one beside him who can help pay attention. Angela's analysis of ability can also come in handy, plus the experience of the mutants in the original world. Kraft felt that no matter how much he tossed, it could not be worse than it is now. So he first questioned Charles's capitulationist approach. What nonsense are you talking about? Do you know how much the professor did for mutant? It can only be said that the brainwashing effect of Charles's set is quite strong, and Kraft only raised questions. Those X-Men, whose average age is over 30, jumped out to the Charles platform impatiently. Naturally, Kraft wouldn't be polite to them. He sneered and sarcastically said, "You are such a big person, don't you even have the ability to think independently? If what this old man does is really effective, why are you mutant doing this? Still this miserable after years?" Mutant has the number, strength and even financial resources. If Charles hadn't kept backing down, how could he have been mixed to the present level? According to the information found by Angela, mutant held a lot of state power many years ago. By the way, it's not that you haven't changed, but you are getting worse and worse. Thinking of this, Kraft couldn't help but laugh. According to the information I collected, dozens or even hundreds of years ago, although the number of mutants was smaller, they could live more comfortably than you. We don't want to be above ordinary people. If mutants are not restrained, they can easily indulge in this easily obtained power. Charles didn't care about Kraft's irony. He and Magneto had argued many times about this kind of viewpoint, and it was impossible for Kraft to change it just because of the stranger's words. So you would rather be disgusted by people like mice? Kraft laughed, and at the same time he realized that these people in front of him were not suitable partners, and he immediately lost the interest in talking with them. Sure enough, it would be better to find the acquaintance's father. I think you need to read more about the history of reforms and national struggles. Whether it is my motherland or your liberation movement, it has never been achieved by compromise. Before leaving, Kraft kindly reminded him. The exposure of Stryker this time can only temporarily improve your situation, but if you continue to be so compliant, more Strykers will appear. You don't think you can build such huge amounts of just by a kernel? An experimental base, right? How could Stryker continue the anti-mutant business for so many years if it weren't for support? Having said this, Kraft felt that he had done his best. He stood up, took out the portal gun and opened a portal, then walked directly in, and Ancient One and Sayuri followed closely behind. Logan followed after hesitation for a moment. I think his philosophy is more in line with my appetite, even if he is not a mutant. Wolverine said when Charles was staying, but he still kept the little mischief. For these homeless children, Charles is still very safe here. In fact, apart from Logan, Orala and the others are somewhat moved. After all, they have been running with Charles for so many years, but they have no hope at all. They have more or less doubted. Just out of respect for Charles, and not wanting to deny the results of their years of hard work, they subconsciously ignored these doubts. Now that an outsider like Kraft pierced their vain shell, even Cyclops, a diehard Charles of Charles, began to reflect on whether his previous efforts were meaningful. The hard work of Charles and X-Men for so many years is not meaningless. In any case, they have given many homeless mutant children a haven. But to say how much they contributed to the peaceful coexistence between mutant and ordinary people is a bit nonsense. The mentality of the X-Men has changed. Charles has already had a full view, but he still doesn't think that his choice is wrong. He just doesn't want any bloody struggle, but only wants to use peaceful means to make mutant live in harmony with ordinary people. You all go back and rest first, Charles soothed softly. The most important thing now is to settle those compatriots. After dismissing the X-Men with other things, Charles felt a little worried in his heart. Although the young man named Kraft is very friendly to Mutant, in his opinion, he is still too extreme in his mind and feels easy to be used by his old friend Magneto. It seems that I have to pay more attention to what Eric is doing, Charles thought. Then he suddenly thought of another thing. Forgot to ask Kraft about Eric's child. After leaving Xavier Genius Youth Academy, Kraft planned to find Magneto. Whether it was from the collected information or Charles's attitude towards him, this man was a more radical master, and he should be able to interact with him. It's more agreeable. It is not difficult to find Magneto, because Ancient One has already met Sabretooth Victor. She just needs to lock onto his breath directly and open the door in a circle. Thinking about it this way, Father Rick's portal gun is a bit unsavory. Sure enough, we still have to find a way to solve the problem of mysticism. While Kraft stared at the portal gun in his hand and muttered to himself, Ancient One had already captured the location of Sabretooth and opened a portal. Victor at the moment was drinking and relaxing in a mutant bar, when suddenly he saw a string of orange sparks in the air in front of him. This string of sparks expanded rapidly in front of Victor's eyes, forming a circle shape. The picture in the circle was completely separated from the environment of the bar, and then a woman who made Victor feel a little familiar walked out of it. Then there was the Asian teenager who said Magneto had children, his old friend Logan, and an Asian woman who didn't know him at all. Although the appearance of the portal surprised everyone in the bar a bit, everyone was mutant, and they had seen all sorts of abilities, so they only calmed down after a little panic, and looked curiously at the carrot coming out of it. Fu Tay et al. Logan. You are not with the group of X-Men. Why are you running to me? Victor stretched out his tiger claws, his knees slightly bent in tandem, and he assumed a position that was more convenient whether he was rushing forward or retreating. After a faint glance at Victor, Logan didn't rush to fight him as usual, but handed over the right to speak to Kraft.
And Kraft was not interested in seeing the two centenarians reminiscing there, and directly stated his intentions. We have something to do with Magneto, can you contact him?
Looking for Magneto? Victor's eyes rolled. Although he was helping Magneto, he was not his subordinate. Naturally, he would not mention Magneto's consideration of safety issues. But, why should I help you? There was a sharp smile on Victor's face. He was a restless guy, and the Kraft group came to the door casually, wanting to cooperate by themselves. How could there be such a good thing? What's more, there is a Wolverine Logan in the team who has had many conflicts with Victor, so it is even more impossible for him to cooperate obediently. However, his provocation failed to irritate Logan. He saw Logan glance at himself casually and continued to stand silently behind the Asian teenager and the woman in a white suit. And Logan's eyes. It feels like he is pitying me, so why am I so pitiful?
Victor was confused, but he soon knew the reason.
The Asian teenager sighed softly, stretched out his palm to himself rather helplessly, and then gave a soft sigh. Guidance magic gravity. A pale yellow light flashed between Kraft's fingers, and Victor, who was pointed at by the palm of his hand, only felt his body sink, and a terrible pressure instantly fell on him. Under the action of gravity, Victor collapsed on the ground with a boom, and a cobweb-like crack was smashed into the ground. His body sank slightly into the ground. Victor didn't even move, even roar sucked. It becomes a little difficult. Then, if you promise to take us to Magneto, you blink. Kraft squatted down and poked Victor in the cheek with his finger. He had too many ways to make them succumb to such a purely carnal guy, as long as their power was not as exaggerated as O'Reilly. The person who knows the current affairs is a great master. After Victor tried to break free from Kraft's shackles and failed, he knew that he was not the opponent of the Asian boy in front of him, so he blinked decisively. Waved his hand to dissipate the guiding magic on Victor. Kraft stood up and said, "Then let's go now. Finish things soon and let you go." Victor, who was lying on the ground, glanced at the unsuspecting Kraft who was close at hand, shaking his fingers slightly, and finally did not make a move. He was not caring about Wolverine and the others not far away, but at the moment he wanted to do it, he suddenly felt a little danger, which made Victor instantly calm down. Anyway, there is no deep hatred between them, and there is absolutely no need for me to fight against them because of Magneto. Victor, who had persuaded himself in this way, got up from the ground, casually patted the dust on his body, and then took Kraft to a stronghold where Magneto stayed recently. As a dangerous person on official record, Magneto usually pays attention to his surroundings, so when Victor brought Kraft and others close to his stronghold, he had already taken Mystique out.
Are they the two you are talking about? After Victor failed to capture the mischief, he and Magneto mentioned the existence of Kraft and Ancient One, so after recognizing the identities of the two, he spoke first.
Yes, they said they have something to do with you. Victor answered as he walked to Magneto's side. Compared with Kraft and the others, it was definitely safer to stay with Magneto, the old man. Looking for me? Are you looking for relatives for my so-called son and daughter? Magneto definitely doesn't believe what Kraft said that he has sons and daughters. This is unfounded. As long as there is no problem with intelligence, it is impossible to believe it.
In Magneto's view, Kraft and the others are just gangsters who want to find their own thighs, and make up an illegitimate child and an illegitimate daughter, just to make them better accept them.
You must know that although Magneto is a wanted criminal, it still has a very large reputation in the mutant group, and its own strength and influence are not low, and there are many mutants who want to follow him.
You mean Pietro and Wanda? I'm not that interested in helping them find their father.
Kraft didn't know where the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in this world were, or even if there were these two of them. He just said casually based on the memory fragments. At the time, he didn't expect to deal with Magneto at all. It's a bit embarrassing to download. He didn't want to continue on this embarrassing topic. Kraft explained his intentions without waiting for Magneto to continue asking questions. I'm here to work with you. Kraft briefly talked to Magneto about their experience in Alkali Lake and the differences between him and Professor X, and Magneto couldn't help laughing after hearing his narration. It turns out to be like-minded compatriots. I said that Charles's approach will only make mutant constantly oppressed by humans. Magneto thought that Kraft, like him, was a supporter of mutant supremacy theory, and his attitude improved. Actually, I already have a plan, but it's a pity that the military police were upset before. After learning that Ancient One could open the portal to all parts of the world, Magneto suddenly became excited and told his plan to Kraft and the others. After a long period of research, Magneto invented a machine that can stimulate the X gene in ordinary people, and he plans to use this machine to catalyze the world's leaders into mutant when he is holding the United Nations Summit in New York. It's impossible to target mutant anymore. It's just that if you want this machine to perform large-scale catalysis, you must use Magneto's ability to drive it, but doing so will hurt his vitality, so he wants to catch the little mischief and let her absorb his own ability and replace him, to drive this machine. Then what will happen to being naughty like this? After listening to Magneto's plan, Logan couldn't help asking. Probably die. Magneto replied indifferently. For our mutants' great cause, this is a necessary sacrifice. Really offensive lines. Stopping Wolverine, who was about to attack, Kraft curled his lips and sneered at Magneto's plan. Let's not mention whether such a large-scale attack on the leaders of the world will arouse the rebellious psychology of other people. The leaders who participate in the summit are not necessarily the masters of their own affairs. The big deal is to ease them early. This is Magneto's the plan is too definitely. And Kraft doesn't like Magneto's practice of using others' sacrifices to advance his plan. In addition, your machine has been tested for several times. Has its safety been confirmed? Has the observation period been longer than 1 year? Magneto was disdainful of Kraft's benevolence before, but when he raised these questions, Magneto's face was not so good, because he had never considered these questions. Even the test was only done once. As for what happened to Congressman Kelly, who has always opposed mutant, Magneto didn't pay attention to it at all. But Kraft changed the conversation. Your plan is actually quite good, but the little family is a little angry. Kraft suddenly discovered that there is another way to make Stryker more uncomfortable. Since you want to play, you should play it bigger. How about turning all human beings in the world into mutant? Let human beings all over the world become mutant. It would indeed take a lot of time for Kraft to study this kind of thing from scratch. However, there are materials from the William Stryker base and a machine in Magneto's hands that don't know how effective it is. If you want to continue to study it, it's easier. As for after everyone has super ability, whether there will be new discrimination based on the strength of super ability and changes in appearance, there is no doubt about this point. When humans do not have super ability, they will all discriminate against each other because of skin color, region, assets, etc. Therefore, regardless of whether there is mutant or not, these messy discriminations will not disappear. Even human experiments on mutant will not disappear because everyone has become mutant. There will always be restless guys to study these things. And according to what happened to the Stryker family, mutant with too powerful ability is very easy to get out of control at an early age. If humans all over the world become mutants, the probability of similar incidents will also increase greatly. But this is not what Kraft wants to consider. He is aiming at Stryker while solving mutants' current problems by the way. What will happen to them in the future is not what Kraft wants to worry about. In fact, compared to turning the world into mutant, eliminating all the mutants' ability will cause much less social unrest. Kraft is not unable to do it, but it will not stimulate Stryker in this way. And a world where the whole world is ability, isn't it interesting? Magneto didn't know Kraft's psychological activities, but when he heard that Kraft wanted to turn all the people in the world into mutant, Magneto couldn't help but get excited. But after calming down, Magneto said regretfully, just covering New York will exhaust all my strength. If you cover the whole world, it's impossible to do it. Who said you want to use your machine? Kraft despised. You dare to directly carry out large-scale operations without a machine that has been repeatedly tested. You old man is really good enough. Magneto blushed when he heard that, and argued, the Unsummit plan is too rare. I don't have so much time to test it. Kraft sneered. What if the sequelae of this machine is great? Then you are attacking the leaders of various countries and the residents of New York at the same time. Have you ever thought about what mutant will be hated by then? Kraft discovered that Magneto and Professor X are really two extremes. It is said that they were still friends who lived and died back then. It is simply unimaginable. After refuting Magneto speechlessly, Kraft asked him for the instrument that could turn ordinary people into mutant and related materials, and wanted to improve it. At the same time, he also asked Angela to track down the hapless Senator Kelly to see how he is now. Due to Kraft's professional appearance, Magneto still had some doubts about Kraft's research ability, but he took him to the laboratory where the mutant converter was placed and developed. Your equipment. Looking at the rudimentary laboratory of Magneto, Kraft's mouth twitched wildly. He found that Magneto was definitely a genius in the folk sciences. He actually used such a bunch of non-professional equipment to create a device that can activate the X gene. But Kraft did not intend to continue to use these unprofessional equipment for follow-up development. He left the laboratory and went to a hall in the stronghold. He said to Magneto, who was unknown to the side, "Fortunately, your place is big enough." Then he took out a universal capsule, pressed the switch and threw it towards the center of the hall. Boom. A burst of white smoke dissipated, and a huge amounts of metal box appeared in the center of the hall. Angela, open the laboratory. Receive. With the girl's crisp answer, the metal box in the middle of the hall opened automatically, but it was empty inside. Just when Magneto and the others wondered what the meaning of this empty box was, they heard a series of clicks. It turned out that the unfolded metal box was rapidly splitting and replicating into floor tiles after another, quickly covering the entire hall. Then Angela's voice continued. The area of the laboratory has been measured and the layout planning is underway. The portable laboratory number 3 is underway. Lines of blue light formed the outlines of various instruments. Magneto and others were dumbfounded to see these blue outlines being enriched by real equipment. After a while, a laboratory full of professionalism just looked at it. He appeared in front of everyone. The number 3 portable laboratory is completed. My brother can start working. Countless spots of light gathered. Angela's phantom appeared in the middle of the laboratory out of thin air. This time she was finally not dressed as the pirate captain, but put on a long-lost white coat. In addition, the Senator Kelly whom you made me pay attention to is already cold. Angela pulled her hands, pulled out a virtual screen and projected it in front of everyone. It was the video of Senator Kelly melting in front of Charles. As for how Angela got this video, it was definitely when Kraft went to Xavier Academy to be a guest. He had already made Angela hack into the computer there, and everything in the school was already under her surveillance.
After taking a meaningful glance at Magneto, Kraft drove the others out. He didn't like to be interrupted when he was doing research.
Kraft's black technology operations are more convincing than anything else, and Magneto no longer doubts his ability at all. And Kraft's true purpose, at the moment, is not important anymore. As long as he can really turn people in the world into mutant, other things will be side effects to Magneto. So Magneto stopped thinking about capturing the mischief and his Unsummit plan, and stayed in the stronghold peacefully, waiting for Kraft's research results, for fear that he would not be able to meet his requirements in time. However, Charles and X-Men didn't know what happened on Magneto. After seeing the tragedy of Senator Kelly, they immediately attracted their attention and started investigating what happened. Especially after finding out that this matter was related to Magneto, at Charles's request, X-Men even put aside the Stryker matter first and tried its best to track down Magneto's situation. After some investigation, Cyclops and the others speculated about Magneto's previous plan, and they also learned that Kraft took the initiative to find Magneto. The thing that worries me the most really happened. After learning about Kraft's whereabouts, Charles shook his head and sighed in annoyance. He felt that when he discovered that Kraft's mentality was wrong, he should forcibly leave them behind and change his extreme thoughts. But now it's too late to regret. Since Kraft and Magneto are mixed together, it is basically impossible to use the brainwave intensifier to search for their location. Charles can only choose to destroy Magneto's plan first. So on this day of the Unsummit, 3 X-Men, Jean Green, Orala Monroe, and Kurt Summers, boarded their school's special Blackbird fighter plane and went to Liberty Island where the summit was held. After arriving at Liberty Island, the 3 were cautiously on guard from the opening of the meeting to the end of the summit, until the leaders of all countries were gone, and they could not find Magneto. Professor Charles Xavier has been very anxious recently. Ever since the 2 named Kraft and Ancient One parted ways with them due to a disagreement with their X-Men, Magneto, who had been secretly involved, suddenly disappeared. But Charles didn't think that his old friend Eric had given up his radical idea of letting mutant come to enslave human beings. Instead, he felt that they were so quiet, it was very likely that they were accumulating strength in the dark and wanted to make a big move. However, Charles has no clue what exactly Magneto is going to do, and how far his plan is going. However, he probably guessed that Magneto might be optimizing his own instrument that transforms mutant. Although the last time they found out about Magneto's plan, they went to squat and squatted lonely, but it may just be that Magneto found a defect in its own equipment, so they had to give up the plan. Taking into account the various black technologies that Kraft has shown before, Charles thinks that this guess is quite reliable. Most of it is that Kraft has discovered a problem with the instrument and is helping Magneto improve.
But the thought of Kraft and the others joining Magneto's side, Charles got a headache.
Not to mention the two tricky mutants, Wolverine and Dead Lady. Both Kraft and Ancient One have the ability to open portals at will. This allows Charles, even if he already knows their location and wants to monitor their movements. It's not easy, not to mention that they can't be found at all. If Charles had been bald years ago, he would have lost his hair hand after hand. Since Kraft and Magneto were not sure where they were, Charles only sent X-Men to the top of America for personal protection, while little Noddy was arranged in the school to be protected by Professor X himself. Thanks to Kraft and the information they obtained from Stryker's base. After exposing everything that Stryker did, Mutant, to be precise, the mutant of Charles's line, has a lot of close relationship with the official. It is simply to appease Professor X, the strongest spiritual mutant, and officials must show their favor to them. This also enabled Professor X's arrangements to pass the official approval relatively smoothly. The only thing that dissatisfied Charles is that William Stryker didn't receive much punishment, he just removed his position and paid a symbolic fine. However, Charles felt that he had finally eased the relationship with the official, and there was no need to cause some unnecessary conflicts, and he acquiesced in their excessive and light penalties on Stryker. In Magneto's secret stronghold, Kraft has produced a brand new mutant converter, and this instrument does not require Magneto to use his own ability to supply energy. After installing a magnetic conversion device, whether it is electric or nuclear energy, it can still be driven by coke. I don't know what Magneto thought at the beginning. Must put a mutant up as a power source. Is it difficult to simulate his magnetic ability? After making this instrument, Kraft asked Angela to perform multiple simulations on the computer, and conducted multiple experiments on mice injected with the X gene, finally confirming the safety of the instrument. The next step is to confirm the final experiment. According to Magneto's idea, it is best to directly attack the officials who were on the front line against Mutant, and he did this before. Although the hapless Senator Kelly died miserably in the end. But Kraft doesn't like this. He also has his own persistence in human experiments. Even if he has enough confidence in the safety of his invention, he doesn't want to force others to conduct human experiments.
In the end, Kraft chose a more conventional approach, catching some fugitives who were surely dead for testing, so that he would not feel guilty.
It was also very simple to catch these criminals. Angela positioned it, and Ancient One opened the door. It took Kraft within a few minutes to catch a dozen criminals with the most heinous fugitives. Throwing them into a special cell, Kraft turned on the mutant transformation device he made. Without any sound and light effects, a wave of energy that is undetectable by the naked eye spreads around these criminals, stimulating the sleeping X gene in their bodies. As the X gene in their bodies is activated, some criminals have obvious signs of their bodies. Variety. My body. What happened to my body? The strange changes in the body caused the criminals to scream in a panic, but after the panic, they found that their body had no other reaction except for the change of color and horns. They even felt that they were too much. Some special abilities. I have become mutant. Criminals are criminals. After discovering that they have become mutants and possess special abilities, the first reaction of most of them is to use their just awakening abilities to attack the cells trapped in them. It's just that Kraft's cell can be easily broken by these guys, not to mention that most of the mutants here are Delta and Epsilon class. The only Gamma mutant is similar to the ability of the beastly human. Its pure physical fitness has been enhanced. After punching the energy shield of the cell for 2 punches, it was electrocuted by the shield's passive counterattack and lost consciousness. There is no problem in the process of stimulating the X gene. The next step is to confirm whether there will be other adverse reactions due to the passage of time. Now that time gem is not on Ancient One, it would be impossible to ask her to help observe the timeline, and Kraft definitely has no spare time to wait here for a year or 2 to slowly observe. So this must use Kraft's not-so-scientific dream technology. Kraft took out a universal capsule box and rummaged in it. When he was bored, he also made a lot of dream technology. Some of them seem to be awkward, but they are actually very awkward, but they are useless. I thought it would come in handy now. Found it. Kraft picked up a universal capsule and pressed the button on it. This is a camera. Since the beginning of the experiment, Ancient One, who has been watching the lively side by side, looked at the Polaroid in Kraft's hand, and curiously confirmed that she really couldn't think of what a camera could be used for. Humph. This is no ordinary camera. Kraft shook the Polaroid in his hand triumphantly. This thing, like a Rayleigh, was made by Zawan Senbei and was named Future Camera. As the name suggests, the function of this camera is to capture images of the future. After briefly introducing the function of the camera in his hand to Ancient One, Kraft flipped the knob on the top of the camera to take pictures of the prisoners in the prison in the order of 1 to 10 years. The photos also really show how these people have changed over the past 10 years. The camera of the future, like most of Dr. Zamaki's works, is very unscientific. Not only can it capture what people will look like 10 years from now, even the clothes they wear will also change, and if the subject is photographed there are props similar to mobile phones in hand, and it can also shoot alternatives 10 years later. In addition, Kraft has already done experiments. If you take a picture of a mouse fed with poison, the carcass of the mouse will be taken. But if Kraft just decides to wait and eat a certain rabbit, the shot will not turn into a plate of braised rabbit meat or a piece of bone, but it will still be a lively rabbit.
So with the camera of the future, Kraft can be sure that there is no problem with his machine, and there will be absolutely no problem for at least 10 years.
After confirming that there was no problem with the machine, Kraft did not rush to Global Mutant, but planned to send Stryker quietly first. I don't know what his expression will be when he realizes that he has suddenly become a mutant. Kraft looks forward to it very much. Alcoholic William Stryker got up from the sofa groggily. He staggered and kicked away the beer cans scattered on the ground, and stumbled towards the bathroom. Since his affairs were exposed, he was dismissed from all work and became an idler. If it's just that, that's all. The ups and downs are nothing to Stryker. He has the patience to wait for a chance to make a comeback, but seeing the mutant group being sympathized by a group of fools makes Stryker feel extremely uncomfortable. What made him even more uncomfortable was that his experimental base was breached by a surprise attack, and all the mutant tools were taken away by the police. This ruined Stryker's plan. For a while, he didn't even know what to do. Now only can rely on alcohol to numb myself. Turning on the faucet, Stryker picked up cold water and splashed it on his face, refreshing his head a little. Can't continue like this anymore. Stryker, who put his entire head under the faucet, cheered up again. His long-cherished wish is to kill all mutants in the world, and continue to sink like this, and this wish will never be realized. Although the laboratory base was destroyed and he was beaten to the end, Stryker has also accumulated some money over the years, and he has also made a backup of the research on mutant. The most important thing is that he knows many high-ranking officials and wealthy businessmen who hate and discriminate against mutant like him. He can contact these people and support him to continue his previous plan. That's right. That's it. William Stryker's eyes flashed. Although the incident of Alkali Lake was exposed, his reputation among most fools fell sharply, but in the eyes of those who opposed mutant, he was definitely a role model and a hero. Stryker, who figured out his joints, wiped off the drops of water on his face, restored his previous passion, and stood up straight up vigorously.
Then, he saw himself in the mirror. The self in the mirror seemed a little different from the past. William Stryker rubbed his eyes, then picked up his glasses and put them on.
A slightly rich face, short half-white hair, a meticulously groomed beard, and the pattern on the forehead is like a snake scale. If you look closely, William Stryker can actually find that his eyes have also become the same heterochromatic pupils as Jason Stryker. However, William Stryker at the moment was not in the mood to notice this little detail. Having been dealing with mutant for a long time, he definitely knew what had happened to him, and the incompetent and furious William Stryker slammed his fist on the mirror in front of him. The shattered lens cut through his fist, but Stryker didn't care. He continued to raise his fists and hit the mirror on the sink continuously until he could no longer see the piece that made him sick through the mirror. Face. Roar ch. Roar ch. Roar ch. William Stryker put his hands on the sink, panting heavily. Although he vented his anger on the mirror, he knew it was useless. He had become the mutant he hated the most.
Thinking of this, William Stryker closed his eyes in pain.
He just got up and wanted to continue to oppose mutant's career, he just awakening his own X gene, or the appearance of Epsilon or Gamma. In this way, even if Stryker went to find those like-minded partners before, it was impossible to get their support. Can't just admit defeat. William Stryker opened his eyes and looked at himself reflected from the faucet, clenching his molars. After a simple dressing, Stryker sat down in front of another mirror again, and he looked at the snake scale pattern on his forehead. This snake scale pattern is not too big, probably only the file size at the bottom of the wine bottle, which occupies the forehead above Stryker's brow bone in a shape close to an inverted triangle. And at this time, Stryker also noticed that his pupil color had also changed. According to the pair of heterochromatic pupils, Stryker couldn't help but think of his son and his wife, who was driven crazy by his own son. Stryker squeezed the dagger in his hand, his eyes filled with disgust and madness, but contrary to his crazy eyes, his hand holding the dagger was very calm, grabbing the dagger and letting it move slowly over an alcohol blowtorch. Ends. As the dagger in his hand was turned red by the flames, Stryker gritted his teeth and pressed the hot dagger to the snakescale pattern on his forehead. What? Stryker's low growl covered the sizzling sound of the dagger's burning skin, and a faint smell of meat wafted out of the room. At the same time, the air around Stryker was distorted, and a glass not far away suddenly shattered in this weird distortion, but its fragments did not fly around, but were crumpled into one by some inexplicable force. Small ball. The breaking of this glass was like a signal. Soon around Stryker, many objects appeared similar to the glass crumpled into a ball by an invisible twisting force. And everything that happened in Stryker's residence was filmed by an invisible reconnaissance plane with only B file size. What a cruel person. This stealth reconnaissance plane was naturally Kraft's handwriting. After he secretly activated Stryker's X gene, he arranged a reconnaissance plane to pay attention to everything here. Kraft was so shocked when he saw Stryker scalding himself with a hot knife in order to remove his mutant characteristics.
He really didn't expect Stryker's aversion to mutant to reach such a pathological level.
As for what Stryker unintentionally showed, it is obviously a gamma-level ability, which is not so important. Then Kraft remained amazed, watching Stryker bandaging his wounds and wearing contact lenses that shielded his pupils. After a short break, he immediately began to call some officials and businessmen who had publicly opposed mutant. This time Stryker wanted to study mutants, not to destroy them, but also because he wanted to turn himself back into a normal person. Oh my god. This guy still doesn't give up. Stryker's behavior once again exceeded Kraft's expectations. He originally thought that after Stryker found out that he had become a mutant, he would be autistic, go mad, and may even commit suicide, but he never expected that he would continue to persecute mutant. But Kraft thought about it again. He hadn't seen black people kneeling and licking whites before, and yellow people kneeling and licking whites and blacks, and there were even such people in history. So Stryker's choice is actually not new. But generally speaking, this kind of people are either not fooled by their brains, or they are driven by profit to sell their ancestors and seek glory. A situation like Stryker is very rare.
Anyway, for whatever reason, Kraft could not understand the psychology of such a person. And he would not just watch William Stryker contact other people and continue to conduct those inhumane human experiments. Isn't Stryker trying to contact those comrades? But if those comrades also become mutant, I don't know how many people will support him. Kraft picked up the portal gun. He was busy again these days.